I'll turn things over to you, Brenda.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I apologize for being tardy. My name is Brenda Johnson. I use she, her as my pronouns, and I am the chair of the Oregon Health Policy Board, welcoming you all to February's meeting. To do a bit of housekeeping to kick us off, the Zoom chat feature in today's meeting only allows meeting attendees to message the host and the co-host, no other meeting participants. Any questions, thoughts, or comments that you have via Zoom chat to the meeting, we'll provide resources throughout the meeting itself to share with meeting participants for any agenda items that are currently being discussed. All materials for today's meetings are available on the Oregon Health Policy Board website and are hyperlinked also to today's meeting agenda. We'll kick off the meeting by asking Tara to join us in roll call. Tara.
Great, thank you, Brenda. We'll start with you, Brenda. Brenda Johnson.
Here.
Kirsten Isaacson.
Here.
All right, we heard from Tony. Tony is unfortunately ill this morning, so he will not be able to join us. Melina Moran.
Present.
Bill Kramer.
Present.
Dr. Hemmings.
Here.
Carly Hood-Ronick.
Here.
Peter Starkey.
Here.
Great. We have 7 of 8 members for quorum this morning.
Great, thank you. As is new to our tradition, we'll also introduce the Oregon Health Policy Board's health equity definition. This guides us in setting our work together today, generally speaking, in health equity. So today, I'd like to ask Bill Kramer to read the health equity definition.
Thanks, Brenda. This is our health equity vision. Oregon will have established a health system that creates health equity when all people can reach their full health potential and well-being and are not disadvantaged by their race, ethnicity, language, disability, age, gender identity, sexual orientation, social class, intersections among these communities or identities, or other socially determined circumstances. Achieving health equity requires the ongoing collaboration of all regions and sectors of the state, including tribal governments, to address the equitable distribution or redistribution of resources and power, and recognizing, reconciling, and rectifying historical and contemporary injustices.
Thank you, Bill. Also, a quick rundown and summary of today's agenda available in your materials as well. So today we'll be talking with the Oregon Health Authority and having some updates. We'll get an update and presentation for our behavioral health division and do some work on our behavioral health committee. We will have time for public comment as usual. We'll also have a great discussion with our health equity committee, both in understanding the work plan for that committee and some conversations about community-based advocacy letters. We will talk a little bit about our coordinated care organization quality incentive metric program and some updates here. And then we'll close our time together and adjourn our meeting. It should be a packed agenda for today, so looking forward to it. To kick us off, we'll start with our draft meeting minutes. Our March 24 Oregon Health Policy Board meeting minutes are in your packet as attachment 1.0. And I'd love to entertain a motion to approve those minutes today.
So moved. This is Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Melina. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Right, motion carries. Next item on our agenda is to take a moment and honor and recognize our former board member, Sandy Sampson. Sandy joined the Oregon Health Policy Board in March of 2022 and served just 2 short years with our board. Sandy was a really remarkable board member and is no longer on the board, but really had supported many years of service to the Oregon Health Authority, had partnered with OHA in our CCO 1.0 and also in CCO 2.0 contracts, done an incredible amount of work in health equity, worked with our tribal affairs partners as well. And Sandy was really a beloved member of our health equity committee for quite some time. Sandy's position is now open and is for any non-healthcare income related or non-PEB or OEB community member that may be interested may apply. We'd love to have tribal representation to fill this vacancy on our OHPB board membership. And this will be something that we'll intentionally solicit as well. So if anyone has any comments or reflections to honor Sandy, would love to do so. Of course, this is being recorded and would love to get those thoughts, reflections to her as well. Trubby, please, thank you. Oh, and you're muted, Trubby.
Thank you, Brenda. And just to introduce myself, my name is Trilby D. Young and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director for Health Policy and Analytics at OHA, and I have the pleasure of working with and supporting this board on a regular basis. I just wanted to share that, you know, the first time I met Sandy personally was shortly after I joined OHA, which is a little over 5 years ago now, and we were doing a site visit with the board and visiting the clinic that she was involved with, the Yellowhawk Tribal Health Clinic. And her enthusiasm and knowledge about the subjects that we were discussing was just so outstanding. I mean, she was a very active participant in all of our discussions. And I remember just feeling like, oh, this is somebody I need to learn from, and continued to do that for the whole time that I've been with OHA. I'm grateful, Brenda, for how you've acknowledged the breadth that of knowledge and experience that she has brought to the agency, not just through her seat on this board, but in many different capacities. And I've really appreciated her spirit here on this board, just so honest and engaged and frank, and really helping us dive into all the different topics, and especially the site visits that we've done with her have been such a joy. So I'll miss her and hope she hears these comments, and really appreciate all that she's given to this work.
Thank you, Trilby. That's beautiful. Thank you. Bill, I see your hand raised.
I did not have the opportunity to know Sandy before she joined the board, but the last 2 years have been a real pleasure and education for me. I know she's been involved with health policy at the local level, the state level for many years, so her contributions are many and long. But the last 2 years in the board, she's added something to the board that I think that we didn't have before. And it was a different way of looking at things and a different approach on many issues. I think some of us tend to get stuck in a kind of conventional, view of things, problems and solutions. And she would always add something that should have been there from the beginning, and that made me, I think many of us, kind of turn around and look like, yeah, that's exactly what we should be thinking about. That's the way we should be approaching this. It's a whole new dimension to our understanding of the problem and what approach we should take. So I really feel privileged to have had the opportunity to serve with Sandy, and I regret that she's leaving, but I wish her the best in her next chapter. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Kirsten.
Yeah, I'll just echo all these beautiful sentiments and also wish Sandy the best and say that I hope to work with her again in the future. And I really enjoyed overlapping with her on this board, and sincerely appreciating this sentiment that she always left me with of like working tightly towards the same goal and the same end, and a better healthcare. But also like absolute courage and willingness to be like, nah, yeah, we're together, but you're doing it wrong. And I think that honesty and clarity is just so important for all of us to keep together, that we can work together. And also, that doesn't mean we always say yes or agree. Not that she disagreed a lot. I don't want to convey that, but it's something that I really appreciated about Sandy to call it as it was. So, best of luck. We'll miss you. I look forward to working with you again, I hope.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you. I just echo all of those reflections as well. I'm also thinking a little bit about how incredibly supportive she was around the redetermination process. And as we saw in today's board materials, Oregon hitting, I think, the third best state in the country in terms of our accomplishments there. And so I get to get excited about the idea that board member voices can help influence program from time to time by giving real life experiences and really bringing it to the forefront of our attention. And we, congrats to the staff and all the people who did such heavy lifting on that work. And then back to you, Sandy, for your encouragement and your wisdom in ensuring we're focusing on the right things. So again, we all wish you the very best. Okay. So next, I'll move us a few more things in terms of board business for today. Have a few reflections and thanks to the staff support in framing conversations about the healthcare market oversight program, or lovingly known as HCMO. We know that the board is really interested in the work of HCMO and has a deep understanding of the impact of the proposed transactions across the state. The board has also been hearing many, and will probably likely continue to hear, public comments related to transactions that HCMO is undergoing review. And there have also been a lot of media attention, or other national media related to transactions recently. So recognizing that there is such a high level of interest and public engagement, connection to the board's goals, our bodies of work, and yet the board is in an interesting position in that we're not a decision-making body for HCMO reviews itself. So our engagement with HCMO, just as a reminder, is that staff will continue to provide written monthly updates, as was available to you in your materials today, with a status of where we are on specific transactions that are undergoing HCMO review. And this format may change a little bit in the future, depending on the kinds of transactions and the review of the HCMO program itself. If board members have specific questions about transactions that are under review, or if you have any feedback about the written updates or suggestions for what might be more helpful in the future, please let Sarah Bartleman know, and we can channel that interest and that feedback through Tara if you'd like. We also want to just reference again that we expect to receive continued public comments at board meetings regarding these transactions, and that it is an important part of our board role as a body to listen fully and give our biggest and best attention for those interested parties as they share what's concerning or what's on their mind. The public comments themselves that come to the board are often forwarded, or will continue to be forwarded, to the HCMO program. And you all as individual board members may choose to submit public comment just as any other member of the public might do. The public comments related to proposed transactions can also be submitted to HCMO via the program email, or as HCMO hosts public events with community, you're welcome to provide public input through those listening sessions as well. The other piece that we wanted to call to your attention, because there's been so much interest in HCMO, and we'd like to propose an educational webinar. It's now scheduled for April 9th at 8 a.m. for board members and for the public. The webinar itself will provide an overview of HCMO, how the program works and has been working for its first 2 years. So these would be things like operations of the program or results of the program to date. It'll share information about how the regulatory process for decision-making actually works. It'll describe this presentation. This educational webinar will describe preliminary and comprehensive reviews, basically the process of that, what community engagement and public comment is all about, how they do follow up on reviews, and how HCMO supports the Oregon Health Policy Board's priorities. I've asked that the presentation also address some myths or common misunderstandings about the HCMO review process. And this webinar will also include some time for board questions and answers. If you would like specific details other than the things I just mentioned that might be included in the webinar topic, please let Tara know so we can coordinate with HCMO staff as well. Again, April 9th at 8 a.m. is what's scheduled. As a board, we'll continue to think, just like encourage us to continue to think about these conversations and how they may be setting a broader context for an understanding of the impact of consolidation in the state of Oregon, how it may impact our goals in health equity, and how we can learn more about the development of the formal state of consolidation report that HCMO is required to publish every 4 years. So we think a little bit about nesting this information in the context of a larger conversation that really is the role and responsibility of the Oregon Health Policy Board, whereas the program-specific details are the responsibility of OHA and the HCMO program itself. If you have questions, again, contact Sarah Bartleman, contact Tara, and we can make sure that we fully educate ourselves about the program as well. Other board business or other Oregon Health Policy Board updates, a quick reminder that our Q1 community digest that'll be circulated about mid-month and then be posted on OHPB's website. So stay tuned for that body of work. It's always helpful to get a deeper dive and understanding about the areas of focus that our committees are working with. And so I'll encourage you to pay attention to that as it comes out. We also just wanted to give you a quick update that Kirsten and I met with Christina Narian from the governor's office on March 8th to continue to explore the board's role in CCO procurement, a quick conversation about board membership and board performance, and a preview of a conversation that we're going to have later on today's agenda about our metrics program. Let's see, other updates. In addition to our April 9th HCMO educational webinar, we plan to host another educational webinar on April 23rd on Oregon's Strategic Plan for Health Information Technology 2024 through 2028. This specific educational webinar will provide an overview of the board and its Oregon's draft strategic plan in such a way that we'll be able to see how the Health Information Technology Council, or HITAC, supports the strategic plan and the board's priorities along with OHA's health equity goal. OHPB will discuss the draft strategic plan at our May meeting, after which staff will finalize the plan. So a preview of things yet to come. Also, we wanted to thank those of you who attended the Health Equity Committee collaborative learning sessions on either March 19th or March 21st. We understand there were different experiences in each of those. I had the great privilege of meeting with several committee members and was really excited about the health equity work that the committee is doing. And of course, we'll have a larger conversation about that on today's agenda. And that covers the board business, but I do want to take a moment and see if there are any specific questions before we go on to our next agenda item. Okay, great. Well, Tara, I think next we get to welcome Dr. Sejal Hathi, our Oregon Health Authority Director, Phil Schmidt from Government Relations, and Ashley Thirstup, also from Government Relations, to kick us off and do a legislative session recap. So I think I'll turn it over to, I guess, Ashley. Phil, who'd like to go? Oh, I see Ashley. Go ahead. Pick us up.
Happy to. I want to just check and see if Dr. Hathi would like to say a few words before we jump into our presentation.
Dr. Hoppy is on her way. She got pulled away for a second, so
Thank you.
she'll be here for comments after your presentation.
Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. Ashley Thurstrup. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the current government relations director here at OHA, and I'm actually transitioning next Monday to a new role as chief of staff and external relations division director. And with that, Phil Schmidt is here, and he will be our new interim government relations director. So really excited for that. The full team is here today. Our plan is to go through some of the key bills that correlate directly with your Oregon Health Policy Board priorities. We won't be able to cover everything impacting health in this short time, but happy to answer questions at the end. And you have access to the full deck that includes other key bills that we won't go into detail today around, and we'll also post our end of session summary, which also includes a lot of information. So just hoping someone can pull up our slide deck and we'll get started here. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself while we're doing that?
Sure thing. Thank you. I'm Philip Schmidt. For those of you who I haven't met, I use he and him pronouns. I've been on the government relations team for a couple of years now, and worked closely with many of you. And look forward to more partnership as we work on y'all's important priorities for the agency.
Great, thanks, Phil and Ashley. Christy, are you able to share your screen, or would you like me to? Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen. One more. Oh, Christy has it.
Thanks so much. While you're pulling it up, I'll be happy to kick us off here. So as many of you are probably aware, this session, lawmakers enacted many new laws and funded programs. It was an extremely bipartisan session, and it will have a direct, dramatic impact on the health of people in Oregon for many of the bills that passed. So major investments were made as well in two of Governor Kotek's key priorities around behavioral health and housing. We'll get into that in a bit more detail in our presentation, but just to highlight some of the key investments that were made, you can go into the next slide. Thank you. I'll wait a moment. There we go. Yeah. So through the legislative session, in a short legislative session, it was really impactful to see the amount of focused energy coming towards addressing the housing crisis as well as addressing the behavioral health crisis. So what we saw was that the revenue outlook, remained stable. Legislators were not able to fund every single priority. However, the $221 million that was $221 million, I'm sorry, of new investments related to behavioral health will do a lot in Oregon to address the addiction crisis, as well as the $376 million in addressing the housing crisis, which we know is such a key critical social determinant of health and directly connected to our work at OHA to address positive health outcomes. So just to break that down a bit for you, and we'll get into this again in a bit more detail, but it's two bills that were part of this housing package. It appropriated $279.6 million through Senate Bill 1530 across 8 state agencies to support investments in affordable housing production, climate impacts, shelter operations, homelessness prevention, and tenant education and navigation. OHA is going to receive $36 million directly to support grants to housing providers to serve people in recovery housing through substance use disorder recovery as they're coming out of treatment or needing that stability. So that's $18 million directly for recovery housing. And then we also received an investment through the Healthy Homes Fund to expand the Healthy Home Funds of $15 million, and that came through Senate Bill 1530. Senate Bill 1537 was the other part of that housing package, which appropriated nearly $90 million to help stabilize housing costs by increasing housing production through removing red tape in permitting processes, establishing some of the strongest affordability standards for new construction in the country, and other really critical reforms. And the other area that I would love to highlight here, and we'll get into it in a bit more detail, is the work that the legislators did related to the Measure 110 and criminal justice reform. So as many of you are probably watching, they face very intense pressure related to Measure 110. And throughout it all, OHA, was at the table and trying to support us wherever we could around the behavioral health provisions that we'll get into in more detail. The kind of the silver line through all of this is that the Behavioral Health Resource Network, the funding for Measure 110 was preserved, and an additional $221 million of new investments was made. Matthew is going to actually get into that, I think, in the very next slide. So we will jump into that here in a moment. But I will also just highlight that our team worked extremely hard to analyze 135 bills, took everyone in OHA and working together. In the end, 35 bills passed, impacting health directly. And today, again, we're going to focus our presentation on the bills that most impact the priorities of the Oregon Health Policy Board. And each government relations team member will introduce themselves as they present. So with that, Matthew, passing it to you.
All right, I'm the first GR member to introduce myself. I'm Matthew Green, he, him, part of the GR team, and working a lot on substance use addiction issues, as well as the state hospital. And I'm going to cover 4002 for a moment. There's a whole lot more detail we're not going to get into, and just shared with Tara, I think she's going to put it in the chat, a website for the government relations team that has much more detail about all of these bills. And there's also a fact sheet on that webpage that specifically has information about, specifically about 4002 in a lot more detail. Not sure where the slides went, but I'll cover 4002 here. And obviously it was the one that got by far the most attention during the course of the session. And there was a criminal justice side to it, and as well as a health side. On the criminal justice side, the key change is that it repealed what's called the Class E violation that had previously applied to possession of small amounts of controlled substances, that essentially made it closer to a traffic ticket. And they brought back a misdemeanor, which is quite different from other misdemeanors in the state, in particular involving the opportunity for a deflection program, which kind of, you've heard of diversion programs, or people arrested for drug-related charges. Deflection program is similar. It's designed to actually kick in even earlier, if possibly even before an arrest occurs, in lieu of arrest. And that if completed, kind of a treatment program and so forth, if completed locally, then no charges are refiled in the first place. Those are run locally. There's going to be a statewide kind of coordinating program, but that's going to be run out of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, not from OHA. On the health side, there are a whole bunch of measures. The Measure 110, ballot measure 110, on the health side actually didn't change that much. The Behavioral Health Resource Networks, the BURNs, continue to exist. They continue to have most of, not all, but most of the money that they had to do the work around kind of a variety of services around SUD. But also there were kind of a whole bunch of wide-ranging group of health issues. Like I said, go to the website, look up the fact sheet if you want a lot more detail. One key one was the expansion of what's known as the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic program, which is a safety net behavioral health, both mental health and SUD treatment services, to 24-hour, regardless of income, kind of safety net services, which currently exist as a demonstration program in some state, or in some counties, I should say. And the idea is this would expand it statewide, including bringing in ultimately federal funding for a lot of this. There's also quite a bit of work in there and money, and House Bill 5204 carries the money, the $221 million associated with this. Good chunk of it focused on the workforce, behavioral health workforce, both in the short term for safety measures, for the long term about training through community colleges and so forth. And basically, puts money into a variety of pieces. In fact, most of it is not actually through OHA, a large chunk through the Criminal Justice Commission, some to the public defense system, some through DAS for a variety of housing treatment programs, and from some to the education department for some educational efforts, things like that. Another one that's related to this, that sort of can travel along with the House Bill 4092, is really a couple of studies, but they're studies that involve getting to a better grip on the behavioral health system, specifically about the community mental health program costs and what it takes for them to continue to operate successfully, and to carry out all the things that, quite frankly, the state has asked them to do over the years, as well as looking at costs of administrative burdens, which, of course, administrative burden from one person is a cost, to another person it's accountability and responsibility and making sure we have all the facts straight. But looking at those and figuring out what are the real costs in the behavioral health system and how can we reduce some of those costs. So again, I'll just cover those. There's a couple others here that I won't get into, but if you're interested in those, please go to the website. And I'm going to pass this off. I think John has the next slide.
Hello, everyone. John English, he, him. Looks like my camera's been turned off, so I will be voice only today. Also a member of the government relations team. Senate Bill 1557, Home and Community-Based Services for Youth. You may have heard this referred to as a Culture of Yes bill. This bill is really focused on provisions to improve home and community-based wraparound services to children and youth under 21. So it does four distinct things. The first is it directs Oregon Health Authority and the Department of Human Services to pursue federal funds to that end. The second piece is that it disregards or waives the parental income requirement for services for children. It looks like I have the capacity now. Hold on. Say hello. The third thing is that it clarifies an order directing a youth who receives restorative services. It clarifies that does not, in fact, do anything to change their guardianship status. So a youth who's involved in juvenile justice system, their guardianship status remains the same. And finally, it prohibits the denial of mental health assessment or treatment based on intellectual or developmental disabilities. House Bill 4151 directs the System of Care Advisory Council to establish a subcommittee on the youth behavioral health workforce. It's really an attempt, the policy rationale here is to do an environmental scan and look at the framework for credentialing that we currently have in the state of Oregon, thinking about gaps that there may exist, and then making recommendations to establish state-issued professional authorizations for improving access to behavioral health and mental health services. Senate Bill 1552 is an education omnibus bill that really has over 40 different sections. I'll just highlight two really quickly. The first is that it creates a forum for historically marginalized youth in Oregon to express voice in the educational policymaking process by creating a youth advisory council. And the second piece, the one that is really impacting and implicates the Oregon Health Authority's work, is that it permits an individual to petition a licensing board to learn whether or not a criminal record will become an issue in terms of them receiving an occupational or professional license. So the policy rationale here is to make sure that we are looking at ways to increase the behavioral health and other health related services workforce and removing uncertainty for those who might want to pursue those objectives. And then finally, House Bill 4086 directs the Department of Human Services to do two studies. The first is focused on the scope of mandatory child abuse investigations in Oregon, and the second focuses on Oregon's response to children who are exhibiting problematic sexual behaviors. And with that, I believe I am passing the baton to my colleague, M. Trogi.
Hi, everyone. My name is M. Drogi. I use she and they pronouns. I am also not able to turn my camera on, so I'm just going to speak to y'all as best I can. Well, actually, I'm going to turn on my video now. so you can see my face. I'm going to speak to the public health related bills. I'm a member of the government relations team holding public health and equity and inclusion division portfolios of work. And if we could progress to the next slide, thank you. So House Bill 4081 creates the Emergency Medical Services Advisory Board, which will develop a comprehensive statewide emergency medical services system administered by OHA. This board will convene advisory committees focused on developing a fully coordinated, integrated, and comprehensive approach to emergency medical services regulation. This new modernized system will provide better services to people throughout the state with fewer disparities in the treatment of time-sensitive medical emergencies. And a fun fact about this bill is that this session, OHA took a single approved position of support, and that was for House Bill 4081. Then we have Senate Bill 1503, which establishes the Task Force on Community Safety and Firearm Suicide Prevention and also funds research on those topics. The task force will study things such as suicidal ideation among youth and people in rural Oregon and best practices in community safety and suicide prevention, among other things related to community safety and firearm suicide prevention. Ideally, this will lead to better understanding of the impact of community firearm violence and of preventing suicide by firearms among all individuals in Oregon, especially those who are disproportionately impacted, such as young Black men and LGBTQIA2S+ individuals. And the last one I'm going to speak to on this slide from me is Senate Bill 1561. And this establishes the State Environmental Restoration Fund, which houses around $700 million received through a legal settlement related to pollution from products made by Monsanto, an agricultural company. The bill establishes the Environmental Restoration Council, which will be tasked with managing that fund, and money will be allocated through the disproportionately impacted community fund, tribal nation natural resource program fund, and state agency program fund to support environmental remediation of water, land, and air pollution. Undoing the harms from pollution will hopefully lead to cleaner and healthier water, land, and air for every person in Oregon, especially those living in areas most impacted by that pollution. And I'm going to pass it back to John to talk about the next one.
Okay, thanks, Em. Me again. Senate Bill 1529 and 1530 are related in the sense that Senate Bill 1529 is a continuation of the state program started under Senate Bill 1536 in 2022 to create a process for distributing air conditioners and air filtration devices. So in response to the wildfire heat dome events that we've seen in the state of late. Importantly, this allows for OHA to distribute these devices to needy individuals in advance of any formal declaration, either at the federal or the state level of an emergency. So that is a very important proactive piece that allows us to get these devices to people who are not eligible through the 1115 waiver, as the 1115 waiver services are reserved for individuals, families experiencing critical life transitions. 1530 is essentially the bill that creates the money for this program to happen. In addition, it has several other important funding pieces for work that implicates Oregon Health Authority. These include $18 million for 12 community partners to provide recovery housing, $15 million for the Healthy Homes Repair Fund, and then the $3.5 million specifically for the air conditioners and air filters to help people with medical needs during these kinds of emergencies. And with that, I think the next slide, I pass it back over to Matthew.
And Matthew, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. So this, there's a number of bills around licensing and health professionals, as the title would say here. The first one about healthcare interpreter system. This is all about making sure that people have a better system of getting, well, ultimately to make sure people have good healthcare interpreters that can provide them with useful information. It sets up a system for assigning them for training to kind of try to make them work better. And the 4129 is about setting up a system where what's called, well, for people who receive services, healthcare services, including some kind of social services through the Department of Social and Health Services, that in their home, there's currently an opportunity. Well, currently the system is either they employ them themselves or there's an outside agency that employs them, and they're kind of very separate. And this sets up a new system that kind of give people a better opportunity to split that responsibility, so that the person receiving the services, has authority over the day-to-day activities of the work and working with them, whereas the outside agency handles some of the administrative issues such as the pay and overtime and benefits and more of the human resources side of it. And so we're going to now jump to the next one. I'm not sure who has the next slide. We had to rearrange these a little bit at the last second. If you could jump to the next one.
I think, Matthew, I think that's me. And I think we are running short on time, so I'm going to do my best to explain this bill, which is fairly complicated, briefly, and then I think we'll try to breeze through to the end and allow time for questions. So Senate Bill 1508, it has two parts. The first is the more complicated one. The Health Evidence Review Commission, which reviews health evidence to make decisions on coverage and treatments for the Oregon Health Plan, in the past has had references to, in the research, had references to a econometric tool called Quality Adjusted Life Years. They're fairly widely considered to be, I think it's fairly well agreed upon that they're discriminatory towards people with disabilities and folks with chronic conditions, this econometric tools. So we worked hand in hand with disability rights groups to come up with a framework for a bill that would prohibit the Health Evidence Review Commission from using or referencing these tools, but set up a advisory committee for folks with lived experience in certain areas to help make sure that the evidence and the tools that the Health Evidence Review Commission is using don't discriminate. And the bill passed. It also became a vehicle for an unrelated concept, which is reducing the out-of-pocket costs for insulin for diabetes. So capping those costs at $35 a month, or I believe it was $105 over 3 months. So that was a bill that we were really proud to work with community and make sure that we pass together. Next slide.
Oh, this is one we covered already. I think things got a little bit out of order. If you can jump to the next one.
One more.
Keep going. Oh, okay, so the last few bills, we just want to recap some of the funding bills, even though this was not the major budget year. That's in the long session, so there'll be another major budget discussion next year. Even despite that, there's quite a bit of investment. You've heard about a couple of these already. The House Bill 5024, which has the $221 million about addiction, substance use issues. SB 1530, which was one of the two housing-related bills, included a whole bunch of different housing-related issues. But for the health side, it was the recovery housing, that's substance use treatment, recovery housing, not the treatment itself, but the housing associated with it, as well as the air conditioners and some funds for the Healthy Homes program. And then the omnibus bill, which is kind of the grab bag at the end of session of a number of funding issues. Several health topics. The largest in dollar amount was about $92 million for the disproportionate share hospital program, which relates to hospitals that serve quite a larger than normal number of people who are on Medicaid. So we can jump to the next slide. This is the whole team. As you see, we have Phil there listed as the interim GR director. So congratulations, Phil. It's pretty new. Ashley's still around, still available if you're interested in talking to her. But this is the whole team. You didn't have a chance to meet everyone. Robert, who works on behavioral health, and Mary Beth, who does health policy and analytics, and Sarah Herb, our executive support, couldn't make it today. They're out well-deserved vacations. Everybody's getting a little bit of time off, but you can always get a hold of us, and there's a link there again to the website that has more information about this, the whole list of bills that involved health, and more information about House Bill 4002. And that is our presentation, unless you want to look at the beavers. There was a bill about beavers this year, about beaver habitats. So beavers became our mascot, and that is in fact the statue of the beavers outside the State Capitol building. And we're happy to take any questions you might have either now or later.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Ashley, Matthew, Philip, John, and Em. What a great presentation and such a tremendous body of work. So we know we barely scratched the surface, so I do encourage board members to follow up with these leaders as you have more detailed questions. With that, we'll have time, I think, for one question. Dr. Hemmings, go ahead.
Yes, hello. This is just a question regarding the legislative allocations for funds for behavioral health. And I was wondering whether or not there has been a separate allocations for those with co-occurring disorders, which is substance use plus mental illness, versus someone who just has mental illness, or is it all combined funds, and how will the entities, whether it's OHA, determine how these funds are allocated based on, co-occurring disorders versus mental illness only, or substance use disorder by itself?
The legislation around that did not focus on co-occurring disorders. That said, the certified community behavioral health clinics very much do address both mental health and substance use, and they received quite a bit of money. Forget how much, in the range of $50 million to get started, although I'm not precisely sure on that one. And as well as community mental health programs that focus, as the name says, local ones focus on community, on mental health, but also end up doing substance use issues related to that. So none of the funding was like specific for co-occurring disorder. It does get brought up in a lot of these systems, and obviously it's a very real issue, whether it's at the clinics, whether it's in jail. Many of the people who come to the state hospital as well, of course, which is technically a mental health facility, also have SUD issues to address. That this particular package didn't, like I said, did not focus specifically on that, but it comes out in a lot of the programs that we provide money to.
I asked that, thank you for that. I asked that question because it's very difficult for people with co-occurring disorders to actually find behavioral health programs that specialize in treating those with co-occurring disorders. And when we're talking about the houseless situation, right, usually we find that the co-occurring disorders actually is what's happening with that population. And that's why I asked that question. I think it's something that should be looked at. Thank you.
One of the places that came up in recent years, not necessarily this year, is in some of the workforce issues where some of the funding was specifically put into to certify and pay higher rates for providers who do co-occurring treatment or treat co-occurring conditions because of the added challenge of working with them both at the same time. But that wasn't specific to this year's legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great update. Before we close this part of our agenda today, I want to give time for Dr. Hathi just to give any other OHA updates that she'd like to share. So Dr. Hathi, are you here?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, great to be with all of you today. Appreciate the GR team for leading us through a really helpful and informative legislative summary. I certainly learned new things. So really grateful for all the work that that team puts into the short session and now inevitably the implementation. And so thank you very much. I understand that the board was interested in learning a little bit more about recruitment progress, especially for some of our leadership team positions. As a reminder, we have at least 6 members of the leadership team for whose roles we are currently recruiting or about to recruit, specifically the chief medical officer, the chief financial officer, the state Medicaid director, the HPA director, the state public health director, soon to be the OSH superintendent, and then the OHP dental director. So it's a lot of positions, a lot of recruitments, and a lot of work to undertake. By way of progress update, I can share that the chief medical officer and chief financial officer recruitments are still open. Those should be closing in the next 1 to 2 weeks. And so any candidates that you have, recommendations that you have for those roles, please do send them our way. For the Medicaid director, we are initiating planning for finalist interviews at the end of the month. I believe members of the board will be participating in those interviews. And so thank you for your partnership there. For the state public health director, we just closed that recruitment and are initiating plans for application review, after which there will be interviews where we hope to engage our local public health and community-based partners, and of course the board as well, if of interest. For the OSH superintendent, we plan to do a national recruitment for that in partnership with a recruitment firm. And so more on that shortly. The OHP dental director, I neglected to say, we are also actively recruiting for. And so similarly to the chief medical officer and chief financial officer, if you have any stellar dentists, please do send them our way. And for the HPA director, we are just about to close that recruitment and likely initiate a new one. And so we will be welcoming any and all prospective candidates for that role too, and really appreciate Ali and all of the interim directors who have served in those leadership positions over the past several months. I also want to make sure you knew, and you got a brief allusion to this with Phil's role earlier, that I announced Ashley a couple weeks ago now as the new OHA's chief of staff. She will be officially beginning in her role on Monday of next week, April 8th. And accordingly, Sarah Dobra has transitioned, or will be rather transitioning out of the interim external relations director role into a deputy ERD director role. And Phil Schmidt will be taking over as interim GR director. Again, that transition is actively transpiring, but should be complete officially next Monday. And so all of that is to say that the OHA broader leadership team has undergone significant change over the past year, plus it will continue to over the next several months. So we really appreciate your partnership and your patience as we reconstitute as a leadership team and inevitably endure all the storming and norming that comes with that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hathi. Are there questions from the board? Okay. Seeing and hearing none. Thank you so much for that update. I know it's very useful, and as was really also helpful, Tara posted in the chat a link to other opportunities for OHA. So encouraging those who might be on the call or interested to please check that out. Next up, we have an opportunity to talk with our OHA Behavioral Health Director, Ebony Clark, who has joined us today, along with Maria Williams, who will help us with a discussion about our Behavioral Health Committee and membership slate. So with that, I would love to welcome Ebony, who's a familiar face to some of us on the board. Ebony served as a board member for a bit before she took this really important role with OHA. So Ebony, if you're here, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
All right. Just for the record, Ebony Clark, Behavioral Health Director for OHA. Pronouns are she, hers. Wanted to, I think I have until about 9:50. Wanted to start with kind of a in-depth update about the establishment of the Behavioral Health Division. I do have a short slide deck, and so I don't know if Tara, you can help with sharing slides, or I don't know if I can share my screen or not.
Yeah, we're bringing those up.
Awesome. All right, great. Okay, so next slide, please. The next slide will just lay out the quick kind of agenda. Next slide, please. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can. Sounds like we've got some technical difficulties. Sarah's on it. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, well, I'll keep talking. Okay,
Okay,
so what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on services division, then talk about kind of just what that process has entailed or will entail. Want to kind of touch on just the intention and strategy that we're holding as we continue to, step into this, I guess it's not future state, it's now as effective April 1st, the current state of the Behavioral Health Division, and then just kind of close with, what the leadership commitments are. So next slide, please. And I will just keep on talking because I don't know if slide decks are working or not. So, so basically, many of y'all know that I joined Oregon Health Authority in February of 2023. And, when I stepped into the role, there had been a lot of continued impact specific to the pandemic, as well as then, the transition of leadership, the stepping into carrying out the priorities of the new administration, and then just, the continued impacts of, the workforce challenges, so on and so forth. And so one of the things that I thought was important was to really make sure that we put pen to paper and brought forward kind of a neutral entity to really kind of capture the themes and things that I was hearing. And so what we ended up doing was we ended up hiring or bringing forward a consulting firm to really kind of do an organizational assessment to really help us understand, what the strengths, weaknesses were, what, opportunities that we should be considering to best position ourselves to carry out our day-to-day work and to assure that we're achieving the behavioral health priorities set forth by the governor and the OHA director. And so there was a org mapping exercise that was done, and it included discussion, collaboration, and interface with behavioral health, with HSD, Health Systems Division, as well as the Medicaid program and entity. And so there was an initial kind of preliminary organizational assessment where there were a number of different kind of, documents that were reviewed from health systems, behavioral health, HR, so on and so forth. There was also a series of interviews that were conducted, with the OHA executive leadership, with the various kind of program leaderships, as well as with staff. And then there was also then some surveys that were launched to really make sure that we also understood what the themes were from the employee perspective. And you'll see in the slide, it kind of shows what the response rate was for employees within the health system division, as well as within behavioral health. And then from there, that then led to the facilitation of focus groups with staff from across all of HSD. And when I say HSD, that included both behavioral health and Medicaid, in addition to then 13 leadership focus groups or interviews as well. And then the consultants kind of conducted, their process for really designing the future state based on certain key principles. And then from there, fast forward, there was a discussion with OHA leadership. And so that was myself, Dave Baden, and at that time it was Dana Hiddle, who was the Medicaid director, as well as Abby Tibbs, to bring forward, or actually the organization brought forward, a key set of recommendations that should then guide how we think about the future state of our work collectively. And so this visual just kind of shows the process that was undertaken to really get to the set of recommendations that led to the sunsetting of HSD and then the establishment of both the Medicaid and the Behavioral Health Division. Next slide, please. So out of the assessment, we wanted to also make sure that we were speaking to not only the opportunities or the challenges, but really wanting to highlight what's working, what are the areas that we can improve, and then what are the areas for further development as we kind of step into the future state. And so what was clear in terms of the things that, were positive and strength-based was the clear commitment of staff to the mission of OHA, and just, the desire to really want to help create pathways for social, emotional, and physical well-being. Again, thinking about just the ebbs and the flows, or the highs and the lows of what it means to do this work, what it means to do this work in kind of a government setting. There's a lot of change, and change seems to be constant. And so it's clear that we have a highly resilient staff within behavioral health and Medicaid and HSD. It's clear that we have a set of staff also that have technical expertise and also bring forward the lived experience, which is crucial to the work, and especially something that we really try to live out as a value within behavioral health in terms of that lived experience. There was a feeling that, the changes with new leadership stepping in, folks were excited and ready for, kind of, what's next in terms of the next page and iteration of behavioral health. And then and again, the last thing I'll say in terms of, what's working and the things that we want to make sure that we're continue to build off of is just the commitment to assuring that we are being equitable and working from an anti-racist lens in all of our work from policy to practice. In terms of the themes of areas that could be improved, continued support for leaders to communicate and speak to the strategic priorities. I think it's that kind of constant communication loop. And so how are we ensuring that communication is, hitting all levels of the organization, and that the organization that understands and folks have a chance to ask questions, provide feedback, and quite frankly, influence our work. Another strong area for improvement was stronger and improved, enhanced onboarding and increased training. Just again, being short-staffed and, us too being impacted and working from a shortage, folks kind of get thrown into these roles and have to hit the ground running. And by the time there's opportunity for orientation, some folks are already 6 months into their role. And so how do we really strengthen up onboarding just so that then we can ensure that we are setting up our staff to do their best work. And then, areas of improvement for, decision-making and approval and clarifying roles and accountability. And I think, again, that quite frankly speaks to kind of, how do we shift from the prior kind of leadership or administration's process, and how do we start to kind of shift into a future state, but a future state, again, that's collaborative, that, creates space for everyone to ask questions, share perspective, and to influence, and, works to ensure that everyone has the same understanding and the understanding that they need to carry out their role and scope based on the positions that they hold. And then lastly, areas that were identified in the assessment were improvements specific to organizational alignment. And so I think there was kind of just a lack of clarity on, roles and scopes, who is accountable. And so again, as we start to step into this role, making sure that we're super clear in terms of, understanding the concentric circles in terms of here's what the role of, behavioral health might be, here's what the role of Medicaid might be, and here's where we are interconnected. There was recommendation around reducing spans of control, just because quite frankly, there's the work is so complex. There's continued to be significant growth over the last 5 to 10 years, and expanding workloads, additional staff that leaders are to take on in terms of their supervisory structure, and so it just kind of impacts that time and support that leaders can really give to help support their teams. And then a recommendation for increased or more cross-team collaboration. And so again, how do we make sure that we're not doing this work in silos, but how are we doing it from essentially kind of an integrative, collaborative partnership perspective? I always talk about this need for making sure that we understand and support a care continuum that's not siloed. And it's important that at OHA Behavioral Health that we're also doing that as we interface with our key partners internally and externally. Next slide. And so after the organizational assessment was conducted, there was a recommendation that was brought forward to establish 2 key divisions specific to behavioral health and Medicaid. We stepped into the new structure as of yesterday. And so essentially for behavioral health, at a high level, what that change means is that we basically will have 3 deputy roles. So there's me as the behavioral health director, then we have the director of the behavioral health, deputy director of service delivery. And that's really, and there's another slide, so I'll get into the specifics in a second. Then there's the deputy director specific to equity, community partnerships, and quality assurance, and then deputy director for behavioral health operations. And then the other piece that I always like to say is that, in this process, no positions were eliminated, and staff maintained jobs, and there were no demotions. Next slide. So this is a visual of the behavioral health division org chart. So you'll see on the left, there's the deputy of service delivery. And so that's really where all of our program, whether it's, specific to, clinical, crisis, care coordination, intensive complex services, those type of things all fall within the deputy of service delivery. So that's our child and family behavioral health work, adult behavioral health work, which then includes the scope of crisis, intensive services units, with that's civil commitment, aid and assist. Then we have our SUD, or addiction treatment, recovery and prevention services, the CCBHC as well. And then we have in the middle, the equity, community partnership, and quality assurance deputy director. So our behavioral health, equity, and community group will now report to that role. The Office of Recovery and Resiliency will also report to that role. And ORR is the team where we have a team of peers or individuals with lived experience that really help shape and influence our work from, again, policy to practice. And then Our behavioral health committee group will sit under the equity and community and quality assurance deputy. And then a new facet of behavioral health will be the quality assurance piece, which will be really important as we, need to have that capacity to really track our reporting and outcomes and understand the impact in real time, just so that then, we can calibrate when needed, know what to replicate in terms of what's, impactful and achieving our goals. In addition to kind of all the elements that also fall within that in terms of auditing, so on and so forth. And then there's the behavioral health operations and strategy deputy, where it would be our business ops team. So that includes the contracts and coordination, our behavioral health workforce incentive group that helps kind of stand up and get new contracts out the door, specific to new behavioral health investments, as well as our licensing and certification team. And then you'll see at the top, the tribal affairs liaison will continue to report to me. So just want to highlight that as well. Next slide. And so what does it achieve? Again, it really helps best position us to, really carry out, the governor's priorities specific to behavioral health. It best positions us so that we can be more accountable to also kind of the day-to-day work that spans behavioral health. There continues to be, or there has continued to be lots and lots of feedback for years, I'll say, specific to the need to really position or develop an infrastructure specific to behavioral health, as quite frankly, behavioral health kind of touches a lot of all of the major challenges and issues that we're seeing play out in our world today. It streamlines us so that we can be effective in terms of strategy and operation, so thinking about, staffing, resource allocation, being able to sustain, some of the, the processes and efficiencies that we're trying to bring forward. All of those things are important, and it helps us to be able to have that real-time capacity to do the administrative and operational pieces so that we're not competing or in the queue, which then kind of impacts, delay or causes delay and adds to those bureaucratic layers, I'll say. Next slide. And as we move forward, we recognize that communication is key. And so, we've tried to be intentional around communicating, the various kind of key phases of where we were at with this stepping into the establishment of the new behavioral health division. We've tried to be intentional around making sure that we're communicating externally with key partners, as well as communicating internally. We recognize that this work is not done in a silo, and that we really have to make sure that we are thinking about how are we going to not only sustain, but quite frankly, enhance and draw closer to the work and the partnership with Medicaid. And we really believe that this structure will help create these additional leaders in terms of the deputy roles that can better support teams to carry out their work, and then also create that capacity for us to be able to sustain pathways for partnership and collaboration around our mutual work specific to Medicaid. And between now and June, we're just, because we went live yesterday, we'll just continue to kind of walk through the refinement and adjustments that comes with a reorg. Next slide. And then, just continued commitments is, really working to enhance and improve the relationship with our Medicaid colleagues and all of the partners that we work with, again, internally and externally. I think one of the questions that has come up from staff was, how is creating our own division going to not make us siloed? And so, you know, that's something I want to continue to reiterate is it's really going to help us be able to have that bandwidth and that capacity so we can be strategic in, you know, co-creating our work with Medicaid and with our partners in the community. And so as we continue to move forward, we'll continue to communicate where we're at in the impact. We'll continue to stay in lockstep with our Medicaid counterparts. And with that, I think that's the end of my slides.
Thank you, Ebony. I also know you have to leave to another commitment quickly. Let me see if our board members have any immediate questions. And Ebony, I promise if you have to jump off the call, we'll follow up with you after the fact and with staff to respond. So no hard feelings if you have to leave early, but let's hear first from Dr. Rosemary Hemmings.
Yes, hello. Thank you for that report. Two questions. One is, how often does the Behavioral Health Division provide a report like you just did to this board?
So I will say that I am a year in, and so whenever I am requested to come to the table, I do. I want to say, and I don't know, Tara, Trilby, Brenda, I think I've been before this board, I think 3 times now.
Okay. Is there a set, and maybe this question is for you, Brenda, is there a set schedule that behavioral health would report out to this board?
Yeah, I think we can definitely take that question as a recommendation, Dr. Hemmings, and look at our annual calendar, ensuring that we've got a checkpoint during the cadence of our time together to update ourselves with this really critically important body of work. Yeah.
Thank you. And then my second question was, I thought that we were going to talk about the changes to the Behavioral Health Committee.
We will.
Oh, but that's not here. Okay.
Not quite. We're going to do that in a moment. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just before, Ebony, before you leave, I just wanted to comment about this incredible body of work you just reported out and how the heavy lifting of any organizational restructure is so significant. And I just wanted to honor the body of work that you and the team are going through. Congratulations on the early launch. And we do look forward to an update as well. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And I look forward to returning more regularly. And so happy to see y'all and I'll return. So thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So Dr. Hemmings was right on. We're going to pivot for a moment to have a quick conversation about our Behavioral Health Committee, a committee of our board. And we're welcoming Maria, who's going to join us to walk us through some slides. We have a potential action for us today about our proposed membership slate. And so if the board is ready, would like to recommend action on that. And if not, we can put it back for further development with Maria and the leadership team. But Maria, why don't you go ahead and I know you've got some slides for us as well today. We'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mireya Williams. She, her, ella are my pronouns. Happy to be here with you all today. I am the manager for the Metrics and Committee Unit or team with the Behavioral Health Division as of yesterday. So if I could please have the slide, or if I could. Thank you, Christy. And the next slide, please. So I am going to just share some information about the committee, just an overview of the charge of the Behavioral Health Committee, which is to, and whenever we can move to the next slide, please, and thank you. The overview of the committee is through House Bill 2086, which charges the Behavioral Health Committee with establishing quality metrics for behavioral health providers. Right there, thank you. For behavioral health services provided by coordinated care organizations, healthcare providers, counties, and other government entities. And it also charges the committee to establish incentives to improve the quality of behavioral health services. Next slide, please. In addition, with the quality metrics and incentives need to be designed to improve the integration of physical and behavioral health care, improve timely access to behavioral health care, ensure individuals are supported in the least restrictive environment that meets their behavioral health needs, reduces hospitalizations, and reduces overdoses. So those are the 5 goals that are embedded in House Bill 2086 that the committee needs to work on these 5 goals in establishing metrics and incentives. The committee has also really tasked or is really focused on a person-centered approach, which really honors choice, improves quality of life, empowers residents, enhances dignity, promotes positive well-being, and supports their independence, which all of those tie in with the 5 goals that the committee is tasked with. So how we go about really centering the person in each of these goals is critical and essential and important for the committee in the work of these goals and tasks. Next slide, please. So we began, our membership recruitment back in 2022, in November of 2022. This round of recruitment, we used the Oregon Health Policy Board Committee Membership Survey, which was not used previously when the committee was first established. So we wanted to ensure that we used that tool because it really does provide us with a gap analysis of demographics that we're looking for within the service array. And we want to ensure that we're capturing as many folks throughout our community in Oregon. We also realized that, there's some not really a clear understanding of what metrics are. And so really what we did was created some flyers that provided some information about the Behavioral Health Committee and the goals. And those flyers were created in English and in Spanish and were distributed within our internal teams, but also with committee members, community members, and partners. And we also posted them on the Behavioral Health Committee website. We did also offer information sessions in English and Spanish to allow an opportunity to really engage with folks to ask questions or get some clarification about the work, and the scope of work and task within the Behavioral Health Committee's goals and charge. Next slide, please. So we had 12 applicants that applied from November of 2022 through October of 2023. Out of those 12 applicants, we had one that was out of state and was not considered, but we did let them know that if they move back into the state of Oregon and an opportunity presented itself in the future, that they would be welcome to apply again. We also invited everyone who applied to a virtual interview gathering to really kind of start the relationship building and getting to know people, understanding the work of the committee, again, providing that visual and virtual opportunity to ask any questions and really get to know about the work of the committee. 8 applicants responded and were scheduled for an interview, and out of those 8, we have 5 that we would like to get approval to for membership here with you all. Out of those 12 applicants that applied, they identified race, ethnicity, and tribal affiliation and ancestry are as follows. So we had 50% who identified as white, Scottish, or Polish, and we had 25% that were of Black Somali, Black African from the diaspora, and 25% who identified as Latino, Latina, or Mexican. The next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we really wanted to provide some virtual interviews to really invite folks in to ask any questions that they may have about the committee and really allow for that relationship building. We gave all of the applicants an opportunity to select out of 3 dates and times that varied so that they had an opportunity to look at their schedules and see what worked best for them. We provided them with information about the committee's goals, the time commitment, so that they had some awareness of what to expect if they decided to join the committee. And we also shared the questions and the responses in preparation for the gathering. So there's 3 questions that are asked on the survey, and what we did is that we just asked the same questions, provided them with their responses, and allowed them an opportunity to share with us in real time, what the responses to those questions were, and if there were any other additional things that maybe they thought about that they wanted to share with us at that time, and for us to ask questions of them as well, and them to ask questions of the panel members who were comprised of OHA staff from various programs that intersect with the work that we do on the Behavioral Health Committee. So it was important to have that meet and greet and get to know the folks who are who intersect with our work and are supporting the Behavioral Health Committee. So, and the applicants shared, were given an opportunity to share why they were interested in joining the committee, which really provided with the, an atmosphere of just, interviews tend to be really, stressful, and people can get anxious when you're having to prepare for an interview. And we really wanted to make it a gathering. We wanted them to just come in and share their skills, their abilities, and why they were interested in joining the committee. And so really great questions that the panelists asked, and also shared their appreciation for the way that we set up these interview gatherings. Next slide, please. So these are, this is a list of our current members. I will say that House Bill 2086 has really specific representation types that is outlined in the bill. And so these are our current members. I do want to highlight Jorge Ramirez Garcia, as he is going to be leaving his role as the Health Equity Committee Chair, or he has already left that role, but I just wanted to appreciate him for all of the work that he has contributed to the Behavioral Health Committee and the team, and just really want to appreciate him for that work. We are in the process of having a new member fill that seat from the Health Equity Committee Chairperson role, and are looking forward to that engagement and collaboration with the new individual who will be filling that role. Next slide, please. This is the list of the new member proposed slate that we would like your approval on. So these were the vacant positions or representation types that we needed filled. So we had a behavioral health director from a coordinated care organization, and Taylor Dombeck is applied and was recommended for that position from the Umpqua Health Alliance, Director of Behavioral Health Integrated Clinical Services. And Taylor is from the southern region of our state, which we currently don't have representation for, or we have one member, that represents that area. So an additional member is always of value. We also have a community mental health program representative vacancy, and we would like to extend membership to Rochelle Burke from Community Counseling Solutions, a crisis supervisor in Eastern Oregon, crisis services supervisor in Eastern Oregon, another area where we don't have currently representation. And we have a data and analysis expert who is Veronica Gallegos Lorenzo, who we would like to also request. to fill that role. And Veronica is an emergency room mental health therapist and crisis intervention specialist. And Veronica represents the Portland Metro area. Next slide, please. And then we have a couple other roles or representation types needing to be filled, and one is a consumer, and we are wanting to have Frida Bekele. She is from the African Heritage Education and Empowerment Community president, and she is representing the Willamette Valley. We are currently in consultation with our Tribal Affairs Office in representation from our tribal government. So we'll provide an update later when we have that position filled, if the tribes choose to have that position filled. And we're also wanting one representative of an organization that advocates on behalf of individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities, and Hindal Farah from the Oregon Department of Human Services. She's a case manager who works with individuals experiencing intellectual and or developmental disabilities. And she represents also the Portland metro area. So those are the 5 positions that we are requesting approval for. Next slide, please. And then we have non-voting members as well. So we have our behavioral health director, Ebony, who just shared updates from our program. And we also have the director of the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission as a representation type, non-voting member, the Medicaid director, and we have a representative from the Oregon Department of Human Services. And we also have a representative from the Oregon judicial system, and that one was an added representation type. So that is not one that is within the bill, but it is one that is of value to the work that we're doing within the Behavioral Health Committee, and really value and appreciate Judge Waller's time and commitment and the knowledge that they bring into that space. Next slide, please. And so today I am here to request approval for the following. So we currently have a representation type, if you may have noticed on the first slide with the current membership, where we have a Health Plan Quality Metrics Committee chairperson. And what we would like to do is change from that to a Metrics and Scoring Committee chairperson. And the reason for that is the Health Plan Quality Metrics Committee hasn't met since November of 2022. And so really to provide that connection of the information from metrics and scoring, it would be helpful to have the chairperson represent that and be able to share the work of the Metrics and Scoring Committee with the Behavioral Health Committee's work as well in our work moving forward. And then just requesting approval for the 5 positions that were mentioned within the slate.
Thank you, Maria. There are a few comments I'd love to make before we take action and entertain questions from the board. The first is to deeply appreciate the level of recruitment effort that goes into this specific committee. I was really struck by learning the specificity of the legislation on the representation types, which I know has been confounding for some time. So I appreciate the level of detail that you've gone into to recruit the proposed slate that we have here. I think with that, I'll turn it to Dr. Hemmings, who has a question.
Yes, hello. Thank you for that presentation. I have a couple of questions. How many, I noticed that the current slate of committee members are people who are currently serving on other committees. Is that correct?
There are some, yes, like the metrics and scoring would be one, and the Health Equity Committee, the intersectionality or the crosswork, yes.
Okay, so the 5 new members that are being proposed today, I noticed that they're not on any committees currently. They're not representing a committee, they're representing various entities, organizations and such. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I saw the consumer representative. How is consumer being defined? Because I think I'm defining it differently. Because I'm thinking consumer is someone who has experience, personal experience or family experience with behavioral health systems, interacting with the system, whether they've been receiving treatment or have. How is that position being defined here in this committee?
Yes, thank you for the question, Dr. Hemmings. So for this particular committee, we do really rely on the identified selection choice of the individual. So this particular individual identified as a consumer. There's also questions on the gap analysis as it relates to like current connections or use of the Oregon Health Plan, or whether they're a current member or have been a member within the last year. So that's where those indicators are provided or shared with us, and that's what we use to identify where the member would like to be represented.
Thank you for that. So when you send out, not you, but when you send out information regarding that there is openings for committees, there's a definition of what each position, each role that you have vacant, correct? So if you sent out a flyer saying that, we have an opening on the committee for consumer, there would be a definition of what that means, correct? So I know what I'm applying for.
Yes.
Okay.
We would probably do that of a more centralized recruitment effort than a broad recruitment effort because of the representation type that is needed.
Okay. How many members are supposed to be on this committee?
There are 13 representation types within the bill that are voting members and 4 that are non-voting members.
Okay, 13. So out of the 8, you selected 5, right? And 3 weren't accepted, correct? You had like 8 final.
Yes.
3.
Yes.
So you still have openings on this committee, right?
We have 1 opening, and that's the tribal representation.
Okay. Has there been any, and everyone has to interview, or is that optional?
That is optional. Interviews are not generally done, as I understand it. Most of the time we review the applications, but we thought it would be best to do an interview just because of the depth and the scope of work within the House bill, and people not understanding really what metrics are and what the scope of the work is. So we thought that it might be best to have that one-on-one so that people had an opportunity to really understand that scope of work.
Because I'm thinking about whether or not that could be a barrier, right, to people applying. Like you mentioned, the word interview can be intimidating. So I wanted just to check to see if it was made clear that was not mandatory, right? This is not a job per se, right? I don't know what the compensation looks like. Just kind of thinking about barriers to getting new members to be on the committee. Are these positions paid? They fall under the same statute around whether or not you're making a certain amount or working for
it falls under the same. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. It's yeah, perfect level of engagement. Thank you, Maria. We, as the board knows, this committee has not been meeting due to lack of quorum. We do have and have identified 2 liaisons for this committee. So as we jumpstart and re-engage our potential proposed membership slate, and invite Dr. Hemmings and Peter to their liaison roles. We're looking forward to this committee getting back on track and in alignment, Maria. So thank you again for your hard work in proposing the slate for today. So with that, Kirsten.
Sorry, can I just ask one question? I know this is tough because the statute is like, here are the buckets, and then you have to find lots of people that fit the individual buckets. So I know that makes recruitment harder. I wanted to just hear your thoughts, Maria, on the representative of an organization that advocates on behalf of individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. There's no doubt I could imagine this. I don't know this person at all, but I imagine a caseworker has incredible depth of experience and commitment to hold that job, and so absolutely has a knowledge set to be that advocate voice. But I will say I have some slight concern that it's not from an organization, well, that I would call Department of Human Services maybe more a service delivery agency of the government rather than a advocacy organization. And there's also an additional person, a specific slot for a Department of Human Services representative on the board. So I would just love to hear your thoughts. Maybe there weren't other advocacy organization applicants, but also kind of, I guess, is there guidance or something about that person's voice being the advocate for these individuals versus from the agency?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question, Kirsten. I think what's important also is that, oftentimes, as you mentioned, the bill really outlines the representation types that we need, and it can make it very difficult to fit into that cookie cutter approach, if you will. I think what's also important is that oftentimes we forget that folks have lived experience that may not fit into that cookie cutter. And so, I think how we really look at that and define that really in elevating the voices of those with lived experience, that's what we're looking for, right? And when we look at our health equity definition and really that redistribution and distribution of power, that is at the core of that, right? So we're not looking at the individual from, as a representative of this, whatever this may be, representation type, but it's also really valuing and elevating their experience as a person, as an individual, and what they do from their family perspective as well, because I think Dr. Hemmings mentioned that, right? It's the individual, it's the family, it's not just the work with folks, but really to that depth and level. So hopefully that helps in answering that question. I think what is important here to really highlight is that, as you mentioned, Kirsten, that when we are so particular, that we may miss out on these opportunities to really bring in folks with lived experience because of the approach that we're taking in the representation types that we need to fill. So I think that could be something that we think about for future reference, and how we navigate that with intentionality for future.
Thank you for that, Maria.
Thank you.
All right, I know this is the action item between now and our break, so I would love to entertain a motion to accept the proposed slate as was presented, including the representation type for the Helpline Metrics and Scoring chairperson. So if there's a board member who is anxious and ready to do so.
Motion to approve the slate as presented.
Thank you, Carly. Is there a second?
Second, this is Peter.
Peter, thank you. All right, any other discussion? Perfect. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, congratulations, Maria. We look forward to seeing this really important body of work and your hard work in making it so. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate you all.
You're welcome. We will now take a 10-minute break, so we'll reconvene at 10:29 and welcome in our public comments. So again, take a nice break, 10 minutes. We'll see you back shortly. I'd like to welcome everyone back from the break. Board members, if you're here, if you would turn on your camera, that would let me know that you're here. That's great. Perfect. All right. Next on our agenda is our opportunity to have public comments. And as a reminder, the Oregon Health Policy Board welcomes and deeply appreciates public testimony. We know it's one of the most powerful ways we demonstrate our commitment to profound listening and learning. And deep listening means that we will not respond to what you may share as you submit your comments, nor will we attempt to resolve or fix the question or concern that you bring today. We'll also not interject to correct any inaccurate comments that are shared as fact. We will, however, bring it into our full awareness, understand it is an important consideration for our work, and listen with careful attention, respect, and honor that you deserve. We want to acknowledge that time held in our meetings to hear public testimony is meant to provide a voice and perspective from individuals and is not a representation of the Oregon Health Policy Board, its members of the Oregon Health Authority. Each presenter is given 2 minutes to share, and in the event that it doesn't feel like enough time, we encourage members of the public to submit written testimony, which we'll commit to reading. To help keep us on time, we'll start a 2-minute timer for each person. We kindly ask that they conclude their presentation when the timer is complete. And please know that written and verbal public comments will be reviewed and discussed during the following each meeting by the board chairs and the staff to determine the appropriate next steps. If needed, what I would suggest is that public commenters actually turn on their video if that's possible, and ask those to turn their videos off until they're ready to speak. There are also guidelines to producing or to the public comment process here, and a link I think that, that Tara has also put in our chat for us today. We have written comments to call the board's attention to that have been submitted, and we'll get a link to those as well. And it looks like today we just have one person, Tom, who has joined us to provide verbal or oral public comment for us today. So Tom, oh, I see Mike also unmuted. So I'll have you just connect with Tara quickly in the chat.
I'm expecting that Dr. Bruce Thompson was going to come on and give his testimony. So with OHPB, guided by the 2024-2025 policy priorities and by its health equity framework, which includes redistribution of resources and power and Oregon's goal of health equity by 2030, you have immense responsibility. What is happening in this state with attempted mergers and acquisitions is counter to this because they are designed to consolidate power and resources and without regard to health equity. In addition, Oregon is in a unique in that its latest addition to our Constitution states that those residing in the state have a fundamental right to health care, which continues to be denied and delivered on an inequitable basis. In particular, I want to call out ORS 413.032 in identifying a significant element of OHPB's responsibility. ORS 413.032 states, the Oregon Health Authority is established, period. The authority shall carry out policies adopted by the Oregon Health Policy Board. This is the first shall of the Oregon Health Authority and gives OHPB a primary oversight of OHA. Your authority to establish policies for OHA to follow is critical in getting us to health equity and meeting our constitutional obligation that includes policies related to what was mentioned in the very first part of this meeting, HICMO. Thank you very much for listening to me and for your work.
Thank you, Tom. It looks like we might also welcome Mike Huntington. Thank you, Tom.
Do you know if Bruce is coming?
I am here. Can you hear me?
It sounds like someone named Bruce has joined the call. Also, Bruce, if you would submit your name for the record in the chat so Tara can record that, that would be great. Next on my list is Mike Huntington. If you're ready, Mike, you'll start the clock for your 2 minutes. Thank you for being here.
Yes, and can you hear me?
I sure can. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm Mike Huntington, a retired radiation oncologist here in Corvallis. And thank you, Chair Johnson and members for hearing this testimony. Despite overwhelming public opposition to the merger, Oregon's healthcare market oversight program did not fend off Optum's merger with the Corvallis Clinic. Optum United Health Group loophole was an emergency exemption clause that allows mergers without conditions if the medical facility would otherwise cease operations because of financial hardship. The opposition to the Corvallis Clinic merger was not unfounded. Last week, Optum Oregon Medical Group in Eugene delivered letters to 13,000 patients announcing that their primary care doctor may no longer be available to them. The letters began with a disingenuous, "It is with mixed emotions that we announce, ... There was bipartisan support to stop such harmful mergers and protect providers and patients. Republican Cyrus Javadi, representative of Salem, said, "We should value the practice structure that brings the patient into close proximity with the provider of services. When we start to scale that up, I'm worried about the decisions and depersonalization that can happen," end quote. Such depersonalization and distancing are also harming local pharmacies, which corporate monopolies are squeezing out of business, as you know, and making prescription medicines less accessible and even less trusted. Please continue to work with the legislature and the governor to strengthen existing laws that delineate what it means to practice medicine without a license, corporate practice of medicine without a license. Close the loopholes in Oregon statutes that allow mega corporations to starve medical practices, pharmacies, and even Oregon into submission. Please work with the governance board also of the Oregon Universal Healthcare Plan to create the ultimate antidote to corporate takeover of our healthcare system. You can call it a USA plan, simplified or unified, simple, and affordable. The governor has chosen and the Senate has confirmed 9 highly capable and experienced members for the board to bring a USA plan to Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that very much. Next, it looks like Bruce Thompson is here. If you'd like to share 2 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Bruce Thompson, a retired family doctor from Corvallis, where I was a shareholder in a small private clinic for 20 years. For the past 15 years, I have been an advocate for access to affordable health care for all people in Oregon. I am a member of the Legislative Committee for Mid-Valley Healthcare Advocates, and I am a member of Healthcare for All Oregon. My colleagues and I have significant concerns for the evolving healthcare crisis in Lane County, as unknown hundreds of patients are being dismissed from Eugene OMG by their parent corporation, Optum. The corporate practice of medicine dates back to the 1800s and is rooted in the tension between the ethical obligations of practicing medicine by trained professionals and the corporate interests in financial rewards by owning medical practices. This tension can have significant impacts and creates moral injury for many medical providers. Moral injury culminates in medical providers leaving a system that is ethically conflicting. Colleagues estimate that 13,000 dismissal letters have been sent to patients by OMG. However, the true number of dismissed patients is unknown. Given the increasing loss of medical providers in Eugene since Optum moved in, it could take 2 years for all dismissed patients to find new providers. Advocates are very concerned that the healthcare crisis in Lane County will also occur in Lynn and Benton County. The trending problems at Eugene OMG are being nervously observed by patients of the Corvallis Clinic as friends and relatives are left in limbo to ponder their medical care future. We ask that OHA and Oregon Health Policy Board publicly acknowledge this evolving crisis. Thank you for this opportunity to provide this information to the Oregon Health Policy Board.
Thank you so much, Bruce, Tom and Mike, for your public comments. They're very, very much appreciated. I believe that's all of our public comments for today. I'm just going to check quickly with Tara. It looks like that's so. We'll move next. Yeah, we'll move next on our agenda to welcome in leadership and staff from our Health Equity Committee. So first, I'd like to introduce Brian Lambert, who is the co-chair for the Health Equity Committee, and Jorge Ramirez Garcia, who is the former chair for the Health Equity Committee, as they review with us our strategic work plan and 2 call to action requests from us today from the community. So let's welcome both Brian and Jorge to the meeting.
Thank you, Brenda. I have some slides to share to work us through this, and we'll begin by telling you a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. This is first of many presentations that and collaborations that we'll be doing with the Oregon Health Policy Board. It is, of course, health equity is literally at the center of the work that you all do, that we all do together. And we're going to be looking at, after we introduce the presenters, and we'll do that in just a moment, we'll talk about the Health Equity Committee strategic plan. Through this, all the plan has used what we call SMARTY goals. I was happy to learn that the IE on SMARTY stands for inclusive and equitable. For those of you who don't know, SMARTY stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. And then we'll conclude, like Brenda said, by sharing 2 community-based advocacy letters with you. So first on the introductions, and I'll go ahead and go first here. We'll invite folks who are listed on the screen to go ahead and pull themselves off of mute to introduce themselves by sharing their name, pronouns, and their role. So like I said, I'll go first. My name is Brian Lambert. I am my pronouns are he, him, and I am the co-chair of the Health Equity Committee. Also listed there on the screen is Katie Cox. Unfortunately, Katie was not able to be here, but they send their regards. Jorge?
Good morning, members of the board and colleagues across the state. Jorge Ramirez Garcia, pronouns he, him. I serve on the Health Equity Committee between 2020 and 2023, 3 years, and as co-chair the last 2 years, 2022, 2023. I am the current co-chair of the Metrics and Scoring Committee. I briefly want to express my gratitude to Equity and Inclusion Division colleagues and the Health Equity Committee for being inclusive and providing the opportunity to participate and present this work that speaks to the last 1.5 years during my tenure as co-chair.
We have our liaisons listed as well. Be great to hear from you.
Yeah, Brian, Jorge, I'll jump in first and then invite Dr. Hemmings to share thoughts too. Really grateful for the opportunity for you all to share the work that you've been envisioning, the connection to the policy board's work, and your strategy and vision for how we collaborate, and the specific SMARTY goals that will put action around the important work that, Brian, you articulated well, is at the center of both of our spheres. So I'm excited for this conversation. I'm grateful for all the work that went into it. And I know it's the tip of the iceberg as we begin to really dig into this work together. Dr. Hemmings, did you have anything you wanted to share as well?
No, I didn't. Appreciated being able to attend the last meeting, and I look forward to the future.
and our OHA staff.
Good morning, everyone. A pleasure to be here this morning. I'm going to be off camera because of bandwidth issues. I live in rural Oregon, so but I am delighted to be here supporting our Health Equity Committee co-chairs. My name is Maria Elena Castro. My title is Health Equity Innovation and Implementation Manager at the Equity and Inclusion Division, and I have the pleasure of supporting the Health Equity Committee along my colleague Alex Friedman. Alex.
Thanks so much, Maria and co-chairs. Yes, this is Alex Friedman. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm also one of the supporting staff for the Health Equity Committee. It's such a pleasure and honor to serve you all. I'll pass it back over to you, Brian.
All right, well, Jorge is going to start off the presentation. I want to make an apology earlier. I thought I had been sharing my slides while I was talking. So if I was making funny faces, that's because I thought the slides were up and you couldn't see me. All right, Jorge.
So way of background, you're familiar with the health equity definition, but we want to call attention that the Health Equity Committee was established in 2017. It's done a lot of work, but some of the milestones, seminal work is to work through. If you created a definition, you know that that's no easy task, but it was created and adopted in 2019 by the Oregon Health Policy Board. And now it's part of our fabric of all the work we do. We undertook in 2020, 2021, during the pandemic, the opportunity to do a process of updating the committee structure. We wanted to strengthen its capacity to support the goal of eliminating health inequities of our state. So we revised our charter in 2022, and it was endorsed by OHPB 1 year ago. We updated our and developed mission, vision, value statements, and then we initiated strategic planning that took place in 2023. Next slide, please. It's a little bit about the process and progress that was made the last 18 months or so. The overarching purpose, of course, is to solidify and anchor health equity as a priority for the work we do in healthcare policy across the state. We wanted and want to bring to life the committee's revision structure, its charters, mission, vision, values. We want to work to develop a process to arrive at an inclusive and equitable SMART goals. As you know, those are relevant and important goals. They're operational and they're feasible, and they're fun to remember with the SMART acronym. But they're SMARTy because they're inclusive and equitable as well, right? So we took a participatory approach, starting with the Health Equity Committee as a driver and co-creator of the strategic planning process. We utilize and leverage existing community voice housed by the Equity and Inclusion Division and Health Equity Committee as a means to jumpstart this process and not delay. Next slide, please. Regarding the progress that we made, the work plan was developed. There's an existing summary and a trackable dashboard that's used to monitor progress. It has 10 strategic goals with 25 SMARTy objectives. And we're here to support, to seek the continuing support from OHPB and OHA on the continuation of the work. In summary, there are 3 focus areas in the strategic vision here. The first one is to steer with healthcare system partners and stakeholders, health equity components across healthcare policy writ large. and its development, adoption, and implementation of policies and key initiatives. The second focus area is to provide feedback on critical areas such as the process of eliminating health inequity programs. To eliminate health inequities. And then the third focus area is to actively collaborate. As we know, it takes a village, and health equity relies on partnerships and collaboration. So the third focus area is to actively collaborate on this development of health equity components across the healthcare system and with stakeholders and community groups through community engagement. Brian will provide more details. Turn it over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Jorge. And yes, each of these focus areas, we have a work plan dedicated to these focus areas, and you can see on the screen. And some of the writing is really small. You have access to this yourselves to dive in. This gives you an overview and an opportunity to see kind of how to navigate this work plan. But again, please take the time to look at it yourselves on a screen that may be more suitable. So here are the strategic goal policy 1, and anti-racism, equity toolkit, relationship building, and community participation. As an example, I'm going to highlight there in OHA orange, the community participation, a great example of that earlier during the public comment. We want to emphasize hearing directly from the community to participate. If you were looking at this, when you do decide to look at this work plan, you can drill in a little further, and I'll give you an example of that. So this is a drill in of the community partner or participation, where you can see the initiatives and the objectives that we are trying to achieve, including who is going to be leading the activity, what the status is, start date, and end date. I focus in a little further to look at that the Health Equity Committee advocates for one community-based policy strategy. And an example of how this can happen is not just public comment, but advocacy can be done through letters. And Jorge and I will be sharing a couple of letters with you a little later. The other part of the work plan is around feedback. And here are the 3 goals under feedback. Again, if you drill in to this one on the Ombuds recommendation tracking. And again, this is just an example of how you can really spend time with each of these goals. And I encourage you to do that. If you were to drill in on that, then you would see the One Smarty objective where we will be talking a little bit more about about our recommendations for Ombuds as well. And then finally is about, and I just highlighted that again. Finally is an example of our work plan around collaboration. And we want to do some power mapping, which essentially means just understanding how we relate to the Oregon Health Policy Board and how we committees relate to one another, to not just understand it, but actually collaborate effectively. And in collaborating, relationship building is really important. And so if we were to highlight on what the collaboration could look like and go deeper into that, I want to pilot a program that that really explains or describes what the Health Equity Committee does in relation to one other committee. At least one other committee. We hope to learn more about the committees as a whole so that we can start that collaboration and then implement an actual plan to move forward. Here are the links. This is an example of the links here that I believe are in your material. And Tara, if you don't mind confirming that, that would be great. This way you can see a condensed version of the plan and then the smart sheet where you can dig a little deeper. And at this point, we're going to pause to see if our liaisons have anything to add that might spark a little bit discussion as we move on.
Yeah, well, I'm curious out of the gate if there are any questions or thoughts or reflections from my peer board members who haven't seen this yet. Yeah, Brenda.
I have seen this and I've really enjoyed digging into the smart worksheets and looking, I think, at the layer of detail. I wonder for this group if you could spend a little time thinking about how you're anticipating any obstacles relative to the work plan itself and how we, the board, might be useful in helping break down any barriers that might get in our way.
Well, I mean, I could speak to one possible obstacle, and that is time. It is an ambitious plan with time posts, and I guess the you can't create more time, but the ask is for support, to say that you're all in, and to recognize that like you, we're a volunteer group of folks who only have so much time, and to to just be supportive and patient with us as we try to achieve these objectives.
I would add that there are ebbs and flows in resources, like Brian said, in resources and support writ large on health equity initiatives. So that continuous support and communication and staying close working with the committee, I think will go a long way. And one more thing, in terms of strategic planning, it is not all said and done. It is a process, and part of strategic planning is also to identify those foreseeable continuous barriers and challenges, if you will. So if they can be offered, I think the committee will take them into account in its strategic planning.
I also really liked earlier what you said, Brenda, about in another discussion about listening. When we talked about listening to members and hearing the public voice, we really focused in on the importance of hearing, whether we're able to do anything or not. And so we really appreciate opportunities for this committee to hear us and to listen actively. And so we appreciate that. All right, I'm going to share my screen and continue with our presentation. And I believe Jorge's up next.
Thank you, Brian. So next we want to present community advocacy letters. As you saw, this is consistent with our strategic plan that Brian just presented, a community-based policy advocacy. It, as presented, was a part of our first focus area, which lives in the healthcare policy co-creation and development. But it's really part of all the focus areas because of the feedback component, and of course, the collaboration and partnership building to move work forward. But the purpose is to shed light on community engagement as an essential component of health equity through representation of community members' voice in the assessment of healthcare status and healthcare needs of the population. We all know that that's essential for healthcare planning. And we aspire to include community groups, voices in collaboration and co-creation of ongoing solutions to provide equitable healthcare. A little bit about the approach. In 2023, the Health Equity Committee reviewed the AMBA's program report, the year-end report in 2022. Happened to focus on behavioral healthcare. Again, it was participatory. We discussed during our meetings. We had group sessions during and between our meetings. And then we drafted, co-created letters, and they were approved by the Health Equity Committee in December of 2023. While we unequivocally intend to elevate community voice, in all fairness to all involved, I do want to highlight that the two topics covered here today are really important examples of the AMBA's work, but we do not intend to be exhaustive of all the work that the AMBA's program represents, of course. Please keep that in mind. Brian, next slide. Brian is up next in the next slide. Thank you.
Yeah, and really what this slide represents is a continuation of what Jorge was saying. And then we anticipated the question you had, what can OHPB do? And so that's an example there. So recognizing that there is not a lot of time, we want to present these letters in two ways. The first letter is the gender affirming care letter. I'm going to read that letter in its entirety and hand over to Jorge to summarize the second letter. And so I just invite you to listen. You do have the ability to hear or to read this letter on your own. I recognize that. And because this letter is such a personal letter that comes from those with lived experience and also from their allies, we thought it would be important to hear this letter directly. So here we go. The Health Equity Committee is writing to urge the Oregon Health Policy Board and the Oregon Health Authority to affirm their commitment to supporting gender affirming care and to address the pressing health equity and social determinants of health needs of lesbian, gay, queer, trans, intersex, asexual, and two-spirit communities in our state. Access to gender affirming care is not only a fundamental aspect of healthcare, but also a critical factor for the safety and thriving of trans, non-binary, and two-spirit individuals. It is widely recognized as accepted standard medical practice by major professional organizations, making it imperative for our state to prioritize its availability. Moreover, expanding access to gender affirming care aligns with Oregon's commitment to health equity and the eradication of health inequities. While Oregon has made significant strides in ensuring access to gender affirming care, there are still substantial barriers that need to be addressed. These barriers include prolonged wait lists, financial barriers to accessing surgery and recovery, as well as scarcity of gender affirming care providers, especially in rural areas. Furthermore, limited access to gender affirming care doesn't just negatively impact the health and well-being of LGBTQIA2S+ Oregonians, but increases rates of depression and suicide, ultimately affecting the broader state population and its economy. The national context cannot be overlooked. Over 160,000 trans individuals and families are migrating away from states, passing policies undermining and eroding access to gender affirming care. Oregon expects an influx of trans individuals seeking healthcare and safety because we are one of only 25 states providing gender affirming care under our state Medicaid program. However, we also confront anti-trans sentiments, making it crucial for us to proactively protect and affirm the rights and healthcare access to LGBTQ QIA 2S plus communities. In light of this these pressing issues, we propose the following recommendations for meaningful action that will keep Oregon accountable and pave the way for meaningful change. There are 7 of them. 1, codify statewide access to gender affirming care into law or constitution, ensuring its protection from undermining changes to federal law. 2, actively engage LGBTQIA 2S plus individuals and communities such as Oregon Trans Healthcare Coalition or Health Coalition and Gender Hive and policy creation process to ensure their voices are heard and needs are addressed. This could include community-led conversations convened and or facilitated by the Health Equity Committee. 3, address ongoing issues related to access to gender affirming care, including the lack of providers, lengthy wait times, and disparities in access between urban and rural areas, with targeted investment in developing gender affirming care workforce. 4, develop policies in collaboration with the trans and non-binary individuals and communities that ensure OHPB or OHA or OHP contracted providers receive gender affirming care training and are held accountable to providing equitable care, particularly in rural areas of the state. This can be started by developing a provider network where peer learning and support can happen and incentivize culturally specific care through reimbursement. 5, the governor, OHA and OHPB to ensure public statements in unequivocal support to gender affirming care. 6, safeguard access to gender affirming care for LGBTQIA 2S plus youth, recognizing them as one of the most vulnerable populations at risk of political scapegoating and targeting. Providing appropriate gender affirming care to youth reduces the likelihood of suicide by an astonishing 73%. And number 7, revisit reimbursement policies around travel and lodging during surgery and recovery for rural patients in favor of covering travel and lodging upfront to reduce financial barriers. It is essential, we believe, to stand united with the LGBTQIA 2S plus allies at the forefront of this advocacy effort. Thank you for your attention to this critical issue, and we remain hopeful for a positive response and the necessary actions to ensure equitable access to gender affirming care for all Oregonians. Jorge.
Thank you, Brian. So the second letter focuses on AMBA's report at the end of 2022 that focused on adult behavioral health. Again, it is an illustrative, important example of all the work that AMBA's program does. In the interest of time, I will highlight key points and paraphrase. The overarching goal is to implement a health equity lens, since we're talking about the adult behavioral health system. The Health Equity Committee letter calls for a robust, responsive and accountable healthcare system as essential to achieve health equity and significantly reduce health inequities by 2030. A concrete way to do so in this context, this one topic is to, and across topics actually, is to call a special attention to health equity priority populations. We have defined those in our Health Equity Committee charter, and they are in statute, but of course they're easy to remember health equity priority populations through the REAL-D and SOGI acronym, right? Race, ethnicity, language, disability, sexual orientation, and gender identity. There are 6 points in the letter, but essentially they call for valuing, really valuing and responding to the community member concerns captured in the ombuds reports. it calls for the support of the work of the AMBAS program by all of us, by all involved, to continue to strengthen the support and support the AMBAS program. For example, strengthen its governance, and there are some examples there. Again, we strive and call for to continuously use the health equity lens and approaches as we consider and work through the recommendations outlined in that report. Those recommendations focus on increasing the capacity of the behavioral health system across the continuum of care. Strengthen the system's capacity to provide supports in housing, residential, and home community-based care for individuals. And really, in summary, to support culturally and linguistically appropriate healthcare across the service arrays. That's in a nutshell. Really invite you to read in detail both of the letters and as you take them into full consideration.
Thank you, Jorge. And we're wrapping up now. Gave you an opportunity to hear from each of us as participants in this presentation, shared our focus areas around policy and feedback and collaboration, and then a deeper dive, of course, into the work plan that you can do. And then a great example, I think, of how advocacy can look and how we are approaching that. And so now there is time. Well, I should check in with you all to find out if there is time. But we're at the conclusion of our presentation.
Thank you so much, Brian and Jorge, for that. I'll turn it to board member questions first, and then ask Carly or Dr. Hemmings as liaison to this committee to say a few words. Are there specific questions for other board members, for Jorge, Brian, the team? Anything in particular coming up? That's a signal of a great presentation for sure. For sure. Thank you so much. So Dr. Hemmings, did you want to reflect on the presentation? Carly, I'll welcome you also to do so. Yeah.
I appreciated the detailed and the effort and diligency that I see and that I hear that's being reflected in the report. And I'm excited to see where all of this leads.
Thank you. Harley.
Yeah, I would just put an exclamation point on Dr. Hemmings' comments. I really appreciate the thought that went into the presentation, and specifically the intention to develop goals that are SMARTY, that we can track collaboratively over time. I fully support, and I think, you know, I would ask board members to kind of join me in this recognition. Also, the letters, I think they're very articulate and thoughtful regarding two really important issues. And Brian, as you said, they're a use case for the strategic plan that the Health Equity Committee has right in front of us. So I don't know that we need a formal adoption of any sort, but I just want to be on the record expressing gratitude and support for your calls to action.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Carly. I wonder if we can press ourselves a little bit further and suggest a board action that does look like that affirmation of support. I think the question of, you know, not required to approve and yet really standing in appreciation in the depth and detail of what's been offered by this community of volunteers and community leaders who have really put their heart and souls into this effort. And so I'd really love to see if the board might entertain, or if there's a motion, perhaps from you, Carly, or Dr. Hemmings, to that effect. More formally, you know, endorse, I suppose, or like fervently support. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. A motion to endorse the work of the committee's strategic plan and these calls to action through your letter.
I second that.
Perfect. It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion about this board action? Peter, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I fully support both of these letters completely. I think in my short time being on the board, everyone knows that I've been talking about securing rights and enshrining them. It's more of, I guess, a question of going like what to sort of do actionably. I think the committee has requested some action. And there are some, as I look at them, just sort of some actions of being able to like forward this letter, express our commitment to different parts of the government, the governor, and sort of forwarding on many of these aspects is pretty easy. So I'm just wondering what would be the next steps if we were sort of endorsing this to be able to look at what can we kind of put immediately when it comes to an advocacy level, because some of these are very easy to formulate our own letter to pass along to the governor's office and through legislative affairs as well.
Thank you, Peter. Reactions to this question from our liaisons? I think Peter's offering us some very practical next steps about yes and.
Yeah, I wonder if it's worth, and I will offer this, Dr. Hemmings, I don't want to throw you under the bus here, but as liaisons, maybe we could have a conversation with the Health Equity Committee at the next meeting about, both what we can do, the low-hanging fruit. Peter, I think you're right. There's some really easy calls to action that would be very impactful and are important to consider, as well as, some of this is the responsibility of OHA. So how are we kind of looking to our collaborators to kind of lift up the recommendations as well? How does that sound? I know we're short on time. I'm trying to kind of balance next steps.
Yeah, thank you for that, Carlene. I see the applause emoji, so that tells me that it sounds like Peter's in support of that. So with that piece of discussion, and I don't want to move the conversation along too soon, if there's any concerns relative to this proposed action, I'd love to hear them now. And if not, then I'll go ahead and call for the vote. So it's been moved and seconded to strongly endorse the letters as they've been presented to this board. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Great. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you again to our committee co-chairs and former co-chair and our leadership for the Health Equity Division of the Oregon Health Authority. This is an important body of work that, of course, is the center of this board's areas of interest, no question. So thank you for helping put that into action and making that aspiration reality. We look forward to continuing to track progress on this important work. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next up, we have our last big agenda item for the day, which is re-inviting the discussion as is part 2 of our Coordinated Care Organization CCO Quality Incentive Metrics. Part 2. Kirsten is our liaison to this work, so I'll have you introduce the topic for us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda. And just to refresh everyone's memory and ground us in this next agenda item, last month we also spent some time talking about the Metrics Quality Incentive Program, really focusing on how that program was created and what it has been over the years. That was part 1. Today, we're moving into part 2, which is going a little deeper into the transition ahead for the program. What the Senate bill passed 2 sessions ago now did related to this program, studies that are underway, and its future. And so I have proposed in our meeting packet that following this presentation by Stacy and Derek, that will kind of ground us in this process of change, propose that we as a board have a conversation about kind of core tenets that we think should be represented in the future state of the program. And I put out a draft statement for our kind of consideration, review, and edit, of course, because I think it would be valuable for OHPB to have I've been thinking of it as a North Star statement, something that anchors us as this goes forward. And I think that is important to do for a few reasons. One, as Stacy and Derek outlined last month, this is a program that has grown to include a sizable amount of money. It proportional with the growth of our OHP population, of course. But I think if we talk about changing how this program works and redistributing these resources in power in a different way, we may experience choppy waters. And certainly the Senate bill that they'll talk about changed a lot when it was in session. And so I think having a North Star, something that we anchor ourselves to, is helpful to remind us about what our core tenets are in the future. And be able to come back to that, to ground ourselves and okay, what are we looking to most achieve in this is important. It's to send that message to OHA, I think is helpful. And then I also think that having such a statement is helpful because this will come back to us, as this work moves forward. It will probably result in other legislation and just like in Senate Bill 966, that came before the board being like, hey, do you guys want to engage in the process on this? Do you want to submit testimony? And so I think on the front end, being clear about the values we hold most dear will help us answer those questions and requests as they come to us over the year ahead. It'll be a long road, I suspect. So that is, we'll have the presentation from Stacy and Derek, and then we'd love us as a board to discuss kind of what are the tenets we'd like to see and the draft statement. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Stacy and Derek.
Thank you, Kirsten, and good morning, members of the board. It's good to see you again. Tara, I am hoping that we can have slides come up, but if not, I am prepared. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Okay. My name's Stacy Schubert. I was here last month to speak with you, and I do use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the Director of Health Analytics, and I'll turn it over to Derek to introduce himself.
Thanks, Stacy. Derek Reinke, Manager in Health Analytics with the CCO Quality Incentive Program, and Stacy's tag along.
So today, Derek and I are returning to finish our two-part presentation. We were with you in March, we're with you again in April, and then as we'll talk about a little bit later, we'll be with you again in the fall. So next slide, please. And Kirsten already talked about this a little bit, but last month, as you recall, we talked about the history of the metrics program. And today we're going to largely be focused on Senate Bill 966, which passed in the 23 legislative session. Then this fall, as I already mentioned, we'll be coming back again to talk about the study that is required under Senate Bill 966 and the results of that. We also have colleagues from PSU joining us at a later point in the presentation to introduce themselves. I didn't want to go without mentioning that. So let's move on to slide 3. And actually slide 4, because I think I covered this already. Okay. So as we talked about extensively last month, when it was designed, the Quality Incentive Program really wasn't designed with health equity in mind, but the landscape, as you know, has changed substantially since the program was first envisioned. And now OHA, OHPB, and really society at large are all grappling with how to meaningfully address health inequities. And I just want to stop and reflect for a moment about the presentation that we just heard from the HEC. I wasn't able to listen to all of it, but it really, I feel like our presentation really dovetails well with what I heard talked about, which was how do we really meaningfully engage community in the work that we're doing. And so I think that's going to be a theme that you'll hear come up a lot in the presentation today. Slide 5, please, or next slide, please. So as you well know, This definition should not be a surprise to you at all, but it was adopted by you and by OHA in October of 2019. And since then, it's really been the North Star for the agency's work. Everything that OHA does now is assessed through the lens of health equity, from hiring practices to program design to resource allocation. And as we discussed last month, the Quality Incentive Program is a powerful lever for change. So it too is being assessed through the lens of health equity. Next slide, please. So the Metrics and Scoring Committee began grappling with this concept of health equity as well after being presented with the findings of the Equity Impact Assessment. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide. The first thing that they did after hearing about that assessment was to develop a draft working definition of transformation, and that definition centered on equity. Then the Quality Metrics Program made available for the first time to the committee data dashboards, which enable deeper dives into measuring the data by race, ethnicity, language, and disability. The initial dashboard that we presented to the committee was called the Deeper Dive Dashboard. It was a while ago now, actually, and it showed 31 measures by the 9 high-level Real D categories, race categories. But today, the committee and everybody else, you all included, can see all of the measures disaggregated by all of the Real D categories. And that dashboard, the much more comprehensive dashboard, is available to you at the link here, and we can share it separately if you're unable to click on that. Another tool that the Quality Metrics Program prepared for the Metrics and Scoring Committee is a working paper on incentivizing health equity through quality measures. And that working paper reviews other states' Medicaid quality strategies for health equity. And again, I'll talk about each of these in a little bit more detail in a future slides. And then finally, during the Metrics and Scoring Committee's April meeting, we'll be reviewing with them an equity-centered benchmarking feasibility report. And that report focuses on data feasibility for stratified benchmarking. The recommendations consider limitations within current program requirements, data sources, measures, and capacity. Next slide, please. So you've seen this slide before, but I'll spend a little bit more time on it. The Equity Impact Assessment was prepared in 2021. It was prepared jointly by staff from the Equity and Inclusion Division and the Health Policy and Analytics Division in OHA. And the impetus for that assessment was that early on, a measure had been selected to be incentivized that OHP members were opposed to, and their views were not taken into account at the time that selection was made. So the Equity Impact Assessment focuses specifically on populations covered in the health equity definition, which means that it focuses on populations who face historical and contemporary injustices. This rigorous analysis or analytic tool, the Equity Impact Assessment, was used to assess the CCO incentive measures, considering OHA's definition of health equity and the strategic goal to eliminate health inequities. The most important finding from this Equity Impact Assessment, which again, if you're interested in reading, it's linked to in the previous slide. But the most important finding is that populations most affected by the measures should have a say in which measures are selected and how they're implemented. And to put that much more simply, and this is a phrase you've probably heard before, nothing about us without us. It's really clear. Okay, next slide, please. So another tool that the Metrics and Scoring Committee has used on their equity journey is the Incentivizing Health Equity Through Quality Measures working paper. And that's a working paper that program staff have developed, and it's a living document. We're always scanning to see if there's new information out in the ecosystem. So the contents on this slide are taken from a paper that has been that's been newly revised with the most contemporary information. The paper currently focuses on 8 states that are known to have engaged in incentivizing health equity. And of these states, I'll just quickly go over some of the results. Of these states, some have incentivized quantitative improvement. Others have incentivized structural milestones. And many of the states have used both approaches to incentivize equity. Among the states that incentivize to reduce disparities, they typically focus on just a few measures, maybe even just one, or just a few, maybe even just 1 or 2 population groups. Next slide, please. Okay, and then during the April 19th upcoming Metrics and Scoring Committee meeting, OHA will present recommendations for stratified benchmarking based on data feasibility. One of the most important caveats, though, of course, is that while data feasibility is crucial, it is only one component of selecting and benchmarking measures for implementing equity measurement. As the impact assessment found, community engagement and authentic partnership are equally important to the feasibility of the data. So with that, let's see, I think there's one more slide. Right, okay. So now we're going to talk about Senate Bill 966, and that's where Derek is going to step in.
Perfect. Thank you, Stacy. Go ahead and do the next slide. So Senate Bill 966 in the 2023 session was really a first step towards that equity-focused structural changes that we believe could make a real difference in the quality incentive program. It defines and intentionally carves out some space for upstream measures, and it requires a study of the program to recommend further changes that'll help align us with OHA's health equity goals. It also made a handful of other minor changes, kind of technical fixes to some things unrelated to the quality incentive program. Next slide. So the 2 metric types that are described in the bill are defined there. Upstream metrics that really are to focus on the social, economic factors, SDOH, structural racism, other similar kind of non-medical drivers or factors of health. And downstream metrics, which are kind of the more traditional measures that you might think of at the clinical level, screenings, immunizations, treatments, or things like that. Next slide. So the bill carves out space for at least 4 upstream metrics and suggests that for at least the current waiver period, the program may prioritize 4 existing measures right now in the system, which are health assessments for children in ODHS custody, social emotional components of kindergarten readiness, meaningful language access, and the SDOH screening and referral metric. Next slide. The bill also directs that downstream measures would be chosen from the CMS Medicaid core sets. So this would allow much more measure alignment nationally and build some standardization that way. Next slide. So beyond the upstream and downstream designation, the bill also provides a framework for Metrics and Scoring Committee to use when selecting measures, specifically calling out alignment with the waiver and with OHA's quality strategy. Also important here to note that the addition of OHPB reviewing measures selected by Metrics and Scoring is new. There's been some presentations from the chairs in the past, but both this bill language and seeing the governor's priorities and your priorities on metrics, I think there's going to be a closer relationship now with Metrics and Scoring and the metrics program generally, and this board. 966 allows compensation, which may help us in recruiting a broader range of committee members, like OHP members directly and other community representatives. Next slide. So those were kind of relatively modest changes. I think I described them as a potential first step because we're envisioning this study that the bill lays out as potentially driving some additional changes and maybe some more substantial ones. So the bill requires a study of the quality incentive program. The research is to address what changes may help focus the program towards addressing health inequities As both Kristen and Stacy mentioned, there's, and you may all recall from last month, there's over $300 million here of possible bonus incentive dollars to CCOs, and those really could be leveraged more effectively towards the OHA's 2030 goal. Health equity simply wasn't a part of the program design a decade ago, and there's much more focus there. And I think many more ways in which we could align efforts towards those goals and really leverage those dollars. Next slide. So the bill language goes into a fair amount of detail on who should have input into the research and the recommendations, who we need to touch base with. First and foremost, it calls out OHP members and communities that are most affected by health inequities. It also directs specific engagement with professionals in the space, such as metrics experts, providers, CCOs, and other system representatives. And this report is due to the legislature in mid-September. Next slide. So for the study, OHA has contracted with the Regional Research Institute for Human Services at Portland State, and you'll meet them in just a moment. Within OHA, we just hired and onboarded a senior policy analyst to help coordinate this body of work. Gladys Rivera was not able to join us today, but we're excited to have her on board. She's served previously on metrics and scoring committee and has an impressive blend of provider and equity experience. She most recently was the director of preventative health at One Community Health in Hood River. We will come back to the board here and present findings in the fall. And some of the changes that, and some of the recommendations that the study might make would be requiring legislative action. For example, the makeup, the seats on metrics and scoring are currently defined in statute. So part of what is driving this fairly aggressive timeline is thinking of a potential legislative concept for the 25 session. Next slide. So we're joined today by the leads on the RRI team who are here to introduce themselves to the board. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it now over to our colleagues at Portland State.
Good morning. Our video has been disabled by the host, so I'm not sure that you can see. Okay, start my video.
Slide.
There we are. Good morning, everyone. Could we move the slides forward 2 slides? There we go. Thank you very much. I'm Debbie Elliott. I am with the Regional Research Institute for Human Services. What we thought we'd do is spend just a couple of minutes today giving you an idea about who we are and what our work is like and how we're going to be able to support this effort. And I think Mary Oswald is also here somewhere in the array of folks. She's the director of the Regional Research Institute. And next to me is Keisha Muya, who is going to be our project manager. We are a team of 12 plus, and we'll engage as many people as necessary to do this work in rapid pace to be able to get a report to everyone by this summer so it can be presented in September. Next slide, please. Just very quickly, and to point out an initial typo on the slide, our institute was established in 1972, which was actually 52 years ago, not 51. We started as one of 10 delinquency prevention research centers. And think back to 1972, we had $100,000, which was a lot of money back then. And we are the only of those 10 still in existence today. Over the last 5 years, we'd had over $30 million in research and evaluation expenditures. And we focus on being a multidisciplinary institution. We are housed within the School of Social Work at Portland State University. But many of us come from different disciplines. My discipline is psychology. Others are from public health and public administration and disability and a lot of other kinds of areas. And one of the things I wanted to point out is that RRI for many, many years has focused on a combination of research and evaluation that address innovation, practice, training, and policy. Next slide, please. I've been at other research entities, and one of the things that is very unique about the Regional Research Institute is we do not do our work in isolation. We value relationship building and partnerships in all the work we do. And I want to talk a little bit very briefly about some of these partnerships to give you a flavor of the work that we've been doing over the past 52 years, as well as more recently. Next slide, please. So a few of our city partnerships, we've had long-standing relationships with the city of Portland. We've been doing work with them for almost 2 decades. The more recent projects represented here are with the city budget office to do a multi-year citywide survey and qualitative inquiry to be able to feed back to the city and the commissioners about what Portlanders think about their life in Portland. And as you may know, life in Portland has changed drastically over the past few years. And so we're working with the budget office to inform approaches for the city over the coming years. We've also worked with Portland Parks and Rec, which has been a very fun partnership to have. That one has really engaged a lot of different aspects of our work, including intercept surveys in parks and at public events within the parks. We also have 2 federal grants right now with the city of Gresham. The focus on that is a collaboration of both mental health and officers to be able to support folks at the scene of a mental health intersection with law enforcement. Next slide. Some of our state partnerships, including the one we're engaging in right now. As you can see, we've worked for a number of years with the Oregon State Bar Association. We have currently working with the Equity and Inclusion Division of OHA to do a longitudinal study of the race, ethnicity, language and disability, and sexual orientation, gender identity instruments that the division uses to gather data. We've also been partnering with the Oregon Council on Problem Gambling. We did that many years ago, and now we're back working with them. But this time it's a focus on collegiate gambling behaviors and attitudes. So we're working with a number of colleges and universities throughout the state to understand that situation. And then we have a recent contract with the Oregon Employment Department to really better understand an intervention for those who are requesting unemployment insurance. Next slide. We also have a component of our work that's really focused in rural communities. One, we've been working for many years with the Ford Family Foundation to better understand and raise the voices of rural Oregonians. We've been doing that through survey work as well as through qualitative efforts like community discussions and focus groups. And we've also, for at least a decade, if not more, been working with very, very small communities throughout Oregon who need to get income data that is better reflective of their community relative to what can be found within the US Census data. So they can determine their eligibility for rural development or let's see, a community development block grant to be able to improve the infrastructure. Next slide, please. And finally, one of the other things we really value is our ability to train and engage future researchers in our work. We have many field placement and graduate research assistants who work with us. We have student employees. We also are notorious for hiring on those students to continue to work with us as graduates and give them a promotional track within the research work that we do here. And the last thing I want to point out, because it really blends with one of the goals of this study for the current legislation, and that is we not only hire people with lived experience within those communities that we are doing our research, but we also, I don't think, have the ability, we don't have the ability to do any of this research without the voice of those community members. And being able to support this research effort by being able to talk with and get feedback from community members is very important. Those are all the slides we have, so hopefully that gives you a rough idea about who we are and how we can contribute to this current research. Thank you.
Let's go to the next slide. Thank you so much to our PSU colleagues. So just as a reminder, repeating this slide, that we will be back to this forum to present the study recommendations, the findings, likely with our colleagues here in that forum. One more slide, please. I know we've got a little time that Kristen wants to talk about a potential board statement, but we also want to just hold a minute here. If there's any questions for Stacy or myself or our colleagues at RRI, I think we would have a couple moments for that.
Looks like Dr. Hemmings has her hand up.
If I understood regarding the CCO, CCOs were created initially, there was not a focus on health equity. Is that correct?
Certainly not as obvious as it is now as an OHA goal or societal goal, as you know, if you think 10, 11 years ago, yeah.
Okay. When did we discover that this was an issue? Because I know we're now looking to address it, right? So when did we discover that, hey, you know, we actually need to call out health equity within the CCOs?
Yeah, and if I could just break in and say, so the work that we're talking about is very specifically related to the CCO Quality Incentive Program, which, so this, we haven't done, you know, my program hasn't done an assessment of the degree to which CCOs themselves and all of their work are focused on health equity. This is really specific to the CCO Quality Incentive Program, which is the incentive program that, you know, makes available to CCOs a rather sizable amount of money to meet certain quality metrics that are selected by metrics and scoring. And that program is the one that hasn't been focused on equity. And I think when it first became apparent was really when the equity impact assessment was conducted, which was in, well, the results were available in, I think, May of 2021. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, that was what I wanted to know. So 2021.
That's when we first had a structured assessment that enabled us to understand, you know, how, to what degree the program was focused on equity.
And we're at 2024. Could you explain what happened between 2021 and 2024? Why did it take us so long to get to this point where we are bringing on board researchers to look at this issue?
Yeah, so I'll just do a very quick rundown. So we actually proposed some legislative changes that were associated with changes for the waiver, the CCO waiver, or I'm sorry, the OHP waiver. And those changes would have affected some of the structure of how metrics are selected. It would have changed the committee structure specifically. And that legislation was in 2023. We first proposed it as a legislative concept. Let me think about it. It would have been, I think early 2022. I might be getting the timing wrong. And then what happened with that legislation is it didn't move forward the way that we had hoped. And so what instead happened is there were some modifications, and what came out of that was this particular study. So that the Senate Bill 966. So that actually passed in June-ish of 2023. And then we worked on getting this contractor on board. And so here we are today.
Just in terms of time frame, the incentive program renewal is when? When is the next CCO?
So if you're asking about when are metrics selected and benchmarks and all of that, they're selected annually.
Okay, so this study that is being conducted, what's the time frame for conclusion of the study?
Yeah, so it needs to be done by September of this year. That's required in statute.
And when does the scoring process begin?
The metrics and scoring committee will select the slate of measures and benchmarks for 2025, starting in spring of this year. So they're starting to talk about it at the upcoming couple of meetings.
So the results of this study will not actually be incorporated in the current metrics for 2025.
That's correct.
We're looking at 2026 potentially before the result of this study actually has any place within the metrics process.
Yeah, you're right. That's correct, Dr. Hemmings. Thank you.
So 5 years from the time we discovered this, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hemmings. I think embedded in your questions is a sense of urgency. And if I could say perhaps even frustration with the lack of urgency up till now. And I wonder if that is a fair characterization from your perspective.
100%. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Toby, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Brenda. Dr. Hemmings, I really appreciate your questions and how you've teased out the timeline here. I think that is really important for the board to recognize. And the one piece that I wanted to add here is that as the agency developed an LC in response to this assessment and put that forward in 2023, this board was tracking and had prepared a written statement of support for that legislation. And in fact, was on the verge of submitting it. The legislative process took some twists and turns, and the timeline was suddenly significantly shortened. And so there wasn't the opportunity for the board to really step in and voice its support for the legislation that Stacy referenced. And I think that this careful attention and that we're all giving it now is really warranted. And Kirsten's suggestion that there be a focus on what are the key tenets that this board would like to bring forward so that there can be, in some ways, a more rapid response as we move forward might be very helpful in creating more of that sense of urgency in some of the other forums. So I also just want to commend the staff who have been tireless and very resilient in continuing to work to drive change and be responsive to the assessment, even when the process isn't always an easy one to navigate or to generate success from. So that was just my comments on the bigger picture here.
Thank you, Tropy. I think I'll turn it back to Kirsten, our liaison for this body of work. You'd like to invite the board to take action on a statement, if I recall. Yeah.
I would, and I do invite us to take action, not only so that we can respond quickly as requests may come our way in the future, but also so we can project a statement to the agency, to lawmakers, to various parties that this is where OHPB stands on this issue, and this is the action that we'd like to see. And maybe we need to add the word urgently to it, because I actually think that OHPB being on the record on where we stand is important, because this is not easy work. And I think that timeline that Dr. Hemmings that you teased out is illustrative, that this is not that this is not easy, and it's not over, and we shouldn't expect it to be easy going forward. So yeah, so to that end, I did draft a statement that is very, something for us to start from. Really invite people to express their own opinions about the core tenets that they want to see, or I'm ready to take notes. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the core tenets well, I guess first you can express. First, I'm assuming, I guess I should not assume. I think that we should make a statement, and then we collectively need to decide what is in that statement. And so first, maybe you agree, disagree about OHPB going on the record with a statement, and then what are the core tenets that should be in it? So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Are there questions for Kirsten on this request that she has for us? You've all had a chance to read the draft statement. It was prepared for you in your board packets. I think we sent out an email request, so it sounds like you've probably had time to reflect on the language that's proposed for us. I'll pause for a moment and see if there are any other questions before I invite a board motion.
I'm at the risk of doing this at the nth hour. We're supposed to jump off soon. I totally agree, Kirsten. I think it's a good idea to put out a statement. The one area that I think I feel might be missing, and I don't have verbiage to recommend, so that's not helpful, but maybe sitting with it a little bit would allow me that space. It's just the recognition that metrics that address equity are not going to be the same as clinical metrics, and the partners involved in that work may not be clinical partners. So the way that we create systems, incentivize, structure, redistribute resources, frankly, to support those different provider types, and I use provider loosely, that are actively addressing equity now, might mean our metrics need to look beyond the clinical walls. And I don't have a way of putting that gracefully in a statement, but I think it's important we recognize we're not really going to move the dial if we keep metrics in a clinical setting. And again, I don't know if this is the space for that conversation, but I feel that pretty routinely, and wonder if there's an opportunity for the board here.
Thank you for that, Carly. Kirsten, do you want to attempt a board motion, or would you like to have us reflect further and bring it back to next month's meeting? What's your preference as the liaison to this committee?
Yeah, I would love, Carly, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, and I would love to hear thoughts from other people, even if it's like, this is right track and I don't have edits, or I want to see X. And then I am happy to go back with whichever board members would like to kind of wordsmith this together, and then bring a finalized statement at the top of next meeting. But I would ask that I would like to work on this between now and then so that we are able to do that quick action at next month's meeting.
Peter, last question.
Not a question. I was just saying that I am willing to work with you, Kirsten, on that, because I think that this is great. And I feel like I'm repeating myself again. Just sort of like bold action on this. I think that there's an opportunity to really advocate and push for incentivizing. I think that there has been a lot of sort of trying to, for lack of a better word, utilize the sort of bully pulpit of the state when it comes to contracting and sort of demanding things. And I think that incentivization is really, really, really important because in how we sort of look at be a great CCO that's coming in alignment with our goals as a state, and let's incentivize that. Let's reward that. And that way, I think it just meets a lot of different things when it comes to health equity, but also we heard public testimony today about making sure that we keep Oregon's commitment towards a robust and sort of home rule of our program in really making sure that it's serving Oregonians and incentivizing that so that it's calling people in, it's calling the CCOs in rather than trying to call them out. So I think there's an opportunity not only to continue doing the great work here, but to also say like we can do a lot more.
Thank you, Peter. I think with that, I'll move us, Kirsten, to your recommendation that we table the language around this statement as it's currently drafted until next month's meeting. We'll put that at the beginning of our action items for our board business. In our May meeting, which is scheduled for May 7th via Zoom. A quick reminder as board members, if you have, much like Peter demonstrated, an interest in helping support the language specific to the statement, please be in contact with Kirsten and we'll stay close to that as part of the board leadership team. Last, I would say a couple of reminders. We have 2 Oregon Health Policy Board educational webinars that are also available on OHPB's website. So April 9th, a quick reminder to engage in the Healthcare Market Oversight Program webinar that Sarah and the team are putting together for us. And also on April 23rd, our Oregon Strategic Plan for Health Information Technology 2024 through 2028, again, April 23rd, and you'll receive details from Tara as well on both of those. Apologies for going a little bit long. Thank you for such a robust meeting for today. I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you.